Okay, thank you, Chairman. We're now live streaming.
Good morning, everyone, to today's Overview and Scrutiny Committee meeting. I will start with item 1 on the agenda, which is the minutes of the last meeting. I note that there is a part of the minutes that will consist of information that is to be taken below the line. If members have any comments on that part of the minute and they would like to discuss that, then I will take that bit of a discussion below the line at the end of the meeting. However, if members are content that they have either only points on the above the line part of the minutes or no points, then I will take the entire item up front now. Do any members firstly have anything that they want to raise in relation to the below the line minutes? I am seeing none. Okay, very good. In which case, are there any points that members would like to raise about the minutes generally? And I am seeing none. In which case, unless I see any dissent, I will take those minutes as confirmed. Are members happy? Yes, seeing some thumbs up. Excellent. Thank you very much. All right, in which case, that's done. We accept those minutes, and Teresa's made a note of that, so thank you. Item 2 is apologies and substitutes. Teresa, could you confirm what apologies you've had and any substitutes are in place?
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, we've had apologies from Councillor Burt, and Councillor Morton is here as his substitute. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I don't know of any other apologies. Councillor Morton, welcome. Thank you for taking up your fully fledged position today, although I note you were a regular attender anyway. So I will move on to Chairman's announcements. I have no announcements to make, so that's the end of item 3. Item 4 are items of urgent business. I do today have one item of urgent business that I've brought at the behest of 2 members of this Scrutiny Commission. It's in relation to cybersecurity. The explanation, which I'm obliged to provide under the Local Government Act, goes as follows. Given a very recent fake email sent to certain elected members in the name of the Leader of the Council and the cybersecurity attack on Hackney last week, there is an urgent need to raise awareness with all members around cybersecurity and to initiate some work on potential member training and future monitoring and reporting. This is especially critical given the nature of our work during the pandemic and the fact that cyber criminals appear to be using the current situation to target individuals and organisations. To address this matter, I have invited Jason Tilliard, who is one of our IT professionals in the council, who's prepared a short presentation as a bit of background. I know a number of members here also have a keen interest in the topic, and I think it's important that the committee today make some recommendations in light of the attacks we've been suffering recently and the potential downside risk that we have if nothing's done to try and ameliorate that situation. Is Jason here, Teresa? Sorry, there are so many people.
Yes, I'm here.
Excellent. Jason, unless members object, I will start off with Jason to give a sort of level playing field through his background, and then we'll go to a member discussion. Is that all right for people? I don't see any objections. That's good. All right then, Jason, well, take it away for 6 to 8 minutes.
Thank you, Chairman, and good morning, everybody. Thank you for the opportunity. Just before I share the screen and start a brief presentation, it's worth sort of pointing out that in areas such as cyber, of course, there are elements that we're doing internally that we're not able to address fully in terms of some specific tools and solutions that we use. But within those minor constraints, I will share with you whatever I can, give you a little bit of a backdrop about the sorts of things we're doing to address some of those concerns that were pointed out back there. Let me just share the screen here, one moment. Okay, hopefully everybody can see the screen that I'm currently looking at. Okay, so 2 or 3 topics really to go over. First of all, the standard countermeasures that we deploy as a council from an ICT perspective. And I'll talk about 1 or 2 of the solutions there, and 1 or 2 of the bodies and we work with and the partnerships that are very key in cyber defence generally. We'll talk very briefly about some of the countermeasures that all of us as individuals, including members and officers, obviously, and individuals in our home lives can address, and ways that we can add to the countermeasures that from an IT perspective we put into place. and talk about some resources that we have available and some help points in terms of places to go if and when you as individuals see something that is unexpected or unusual. So just to come to the countermeasures piece, I think the first and one of the most important points of this is that we certainly do not rely on any single line of defense when it comes to cybersecurity. You can think of this, if you like, graphically as the many layers of an onion, multiple layers of defense that we deploy. So among those is a suite of cybersecurity tools which protect us from attacks such as anti-malware, antivirus, that sort of solution and so forth, and work 24/7, sitting in the background, screening us where possible from that sort of content. Over and above that, we deploy, as you might expect, a number of very resilient and robust corporate firewalls to protect us, the data sets that are particularly sensitive to the council's business. And we can control and direct which traffic is allowed through those firewalls and into that sort of set of data. So those are things that we are doing on our own behalf internally as standard IT pieces of protection. And it's true to say, with the evolving nature of this piece, we're adjusting those, tuning those, adding those, updating those all the time. And one of the disciplines I think in this area is if you think you're there from a point of view of having a complete solution, the chances are you are probably not, because of the way this stuff evolves all the way through all the time on a constant basis. So whilst we're doing all of that stuff, it's also very true to say that partnerships are very key to us in the way that we defend against these sorts of attacks. The one that I picked out in particular is the NCSC, the National Cybersecurity Council, and a very, very powerful, very well-connected and very expert community within the NCSC who have, for example, been actively involved in the countermeasures and mop-up activity as a result of what's been going on in Hackney. And they have released to us, under fairly strict confidentiality terms, advice and guidance about some additional recommendations and processes that we can put into place as well. We work closely with Norfolk County Council. We work with the other local district councils as part of, and the next bullet point, the Norfolk Cyber Delivery Group, which is attended by all of the local district councils and some blue light services as well. So we have good visibility across the piece. And obviously there's a good information exchange if any of those organizations see anything unusual or unexpected, or an increase in things like malware or virus sorts of attack, or indeed attempted attack. So along with that, we also have a regional thing called a WARP, the Warning, Advice and Reporting Point, which is another consortium of all sorts of organizations, mainly local government. Again, and that's a sort of distant early warning, heads up, we have something happening that we can tap into, and that spreads information very, very quickly if they see, if an attack is seen or noticed anywhere, shared around the community and so forth. And obviously we can take very quick countermeasures if we are informed by that route of any particular attack that's developing. We do carry out our own internal phishing exercises. We've actually carried out one relatively recently in the last 2 or 3 months. We do not, of course, announce that we're going to do that. We did see perhaps a small number of clicks from the last phishing exercise that we didn't necessarily expect to see. And I think, you know, there's the exercise itself, but the follow-up and the education to come from it in terms of directing towards e-learning and other knowledge, in terms of looking just to maybe influence people's behaviors when they see emails or dubious or unexpected information in emails, actually what to do about it and where to report it. So to touch on the point that was made back there about training and education, I think that one's pretty key. And just towards the end, I'll mention that training piece a little bit more. Bottom right of the slide there, just a statistic to show how some of this automated stuff actually works and works successfully, works all the time. In the last 14-day reporting window, something approaching 100 emails containing virus data have been automatically detected and blocked, and something approaching 90 phishing emails similarly have been blocked. So you can see that those things are running constantly in the background, are actually very effective and efficient. Moving on, although I've put countermeasures for members, this is all about people. This is about officers. This is about each of all of us as individuals. And I think what this underscores is that despite technology and partnerships and so on, a good cybersecurity approach actually blends people, process, and technology. But it's quite an interesting phrase to think of us all as being part of the human firewall. And then we just come to a little bit about behaviors. And one of the key things I think is if you as individuals see anything suspicious, then the request is very clearly to report it immediately into Breckland IT. And obviously there's some standard stuff in there, which I probably don't need to go through, but the obvious things like not clicking on unknown links or files in emails, make sure that any information that you have that is sensitive, secure, financially secret or whatever is not revealed, and obvious things like login details, passwords, and so on. And crucially, and very topically, I think, given some of the email traffic that perhaps you guys have seen in the last week or two, always be alert to the telltale phishing signs if they exist, such as poor spellings, unusual email addresses, and so on. That said, we all know that people generating phishing email are very, very clever. And sometimes the telltale signs are particularly difficult to spot. So although it's a good discipline, it's not always easy actually to spot, and they get more and more sophisticated all the time. So finally, just some resources and help points for members. Just to repeat, ICT, the help desk at Breckland, is the place to flag by phone or by email anything that you think is suspicious. The earlier we know, the quicker we can disseminate information, the quicker potentially we can put on additional filters or protection in our cybersecurity tools and so on. We do deploy an e-learning suite that covers a number of cybersecurity things, including all of the stuff that I've mentioned there, information about phishing, also some overlap with topics such as GDPR as well, which is thoroughly covered elsewhere too. It's a suite called Dojo. The URL I've mentioned there, but we will be circulating details of that in order to actually drive up consumption, if you like, of that training. It's pretty good. It's not something that is, how would you describe it? It's been put together by a number of local authorities, so it has very much our own business area in play, as opposed to being a commercial offering and perhaps covering areas that are not particularly suitable for us. So it's a good training package. I would recommend it to you, but we will be circulating details of that in the days to come, and try and encourage people to take that up in more numbers. And by the way, that's just as much the case for officers as it is for members. So I will stop there. I'm happy to take any questions within the confines, obviously, of what we're able to talk about and so forth. I will just stop sharing now.
Thank you very much for that, Jason. So what I propose to do is take first questions from members for Jason, and then if members want to make any proposals or have discussion of the matter without questions, then we can move on to that stage. So firstly, do any members have any specific questions they want to ask in light of Jason's presentation? I've got Mark Kittle-Morris, and I don't think, and Linda and Robert, and I think that's it. So Mark, if you kick us off then, please.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Good morning, everybody. I was interested in what was said actually before the meeting, and that presentation was very useful. Thank you for that. However, if you refer back to the Governance and Audit Committee meeting on the 8th of October, there is an update on internal audit recommendations that haven't been fulfilled. And I noticed from 17-18, there are 3 cybersecurity recommendations which haven't been fulfilled, and 18-19 there are a further 3 cybersecurity. And I note that one of those at least is for firewall. I just wonder if there's a comment that we could have back from Jason on that particular, what's happening with those recommendations and how quickly we can close the gap to make sure that they're actually fulfilled.
Certainly. Sorry,
yeah, go ahead, Jason.
Yeah, certainly with regards to the firewall one, I understand. I believe that's actually been completed now. It was the deployment of, in effect, a secondary layer of firewall technology. I'm happy to confirm that and take that offline for you. One other thing to touch on is that at this time, we are currently doing an overhaul of all of the ICT policies, which is something that unsurprisingly audit previously have picked up. And the intention is to rewrite and update all of those within the next 3-month period.
Thank you, Jason. Anything further, Mark, or is that?
No, thank you, Chairman. I just wanted to bring that to members' attention. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you. Linda, next then, please.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. I just want to re-emphasise what Jason said. The details for the online training session were sent out to members some months ago. Those of us that have done it have found it very useful. I appreciate it's probably been updated since then, but please do take a little while just to do that, because we've all suffered, I think, one way or the other with phishing exercises or people asking for information. And the one that went out this last week, purportedly from the leader, was using the same false email address that was used last year when myself and several other people were hacked into. So my advice as a lay person, not very techie, is always check where that email has come from before you do anything else. Thank you, Rodri.
Thank you, Linda. And unless Jason has anything to add on that, I was going to move to Robert. Robert, go ahead.
Thank you, Chairman. The most recent, we'll call it phishing email in the name of the leader, was, I think, from a Gmail account. Are Google responsive to having such a suspicious activity reported to them, such that they can close that account down?
So certainly there are reporting routes into Google in terms of what their criteria set is in order to, for want of a better term, justify closure of an individual account. Honestly, not something I'm familiar with. We could take that away and find out for you what, how would you put it, what evidence trail something like somebody like a Google would need in order to justify closing down an individual account. I would suspect it's quite taxing in terms of coming up with that information base, but I'm happy to take that one offline and see what we can find out.
Thank you, Jason. Is that sufficient, Robert?
Yes, I would assume that Google would be more responsive to an approach from a national or government organisation than perhaps from an individual.
I'd have assumed that would be the case as well. I haven't got any further questions for... Oh, I've got Ian and then I've got Mike. Ian, go ahead, then Mike.
Thanks, Chairman. It's just quickly that I was certainly on the receiving end of an incredibly unusual email. It was allegedly from Sam Chapman wanting a chat. So I immediately saw that as suspicious. But the response I had back, and which was great, but said there should usually be there is a button at the bottom of each email that comes in that says reported to spam. For some reason, I've been back in to check the email trail. There was no button at the bottom of that email to report. So just noting that one as something else that seems to have happened.
Jason, do you have any comments you can make on where the phishing button might have gone to?
I think the only way to do that one justice is if Councillor Martin could maybe forward that email trail to me, assuming it doesn't itself contain any harmful content. I'd be happy to have a look at that and see if we can see what's happened there.
Thank you. And Mike.
Mine is not so much a question as an actual statement of what has actually happened to me. In June of this year, somebody actually managed to get details of my login details for my bank account and actually tried to withdraw over £2,500 from my account, take out a £23,000 loan and adjust my overdraft and what have you. Fortunately, because of the way it actually worked, is that I'd been able to check my account earlier that morning. And when I got a notice that I was severely overdrawn, I immediately got on the bank and they were able to actually reverse that happening. I have reported it to Action Fraud. And so when I actually come on to now, what I'm actually going to actually turn around and say is these are recommendations which not may necessarily apply to your use of the Breckland website, but your own private system. First and foremost, the one thing which I would actually heartily recommend is that nobody actually stores their password details and login details and what have you on an app on their computer relating to anything like their bank account, their PayPal account, etc. Because these in actual fact can be subject to breaches of data. There are several ways you can actually check which ones have actually been subject to a data thing. And there's a website called Have I Been Pwned? The person who actually set it up had been subject to a vicious cyber attack. And when he actually set up the website, he transposed the P for the O. So it should have I been owned, but it isn't. It's have I been pwned? That way you can actually check whether or not your own individual email accounts have actually been compromised, your passwords have been compromised, and you can also check on data breaches of other websites, etc. I'm now more than ever convinced that I was subject to a data breach. When you get the phishing emails, there are two ways you can actually just check who they're from without really opening them. The first is to actually go onto the email address at the top or the thing. Normally it will just be a highlighted name like BT or something like that. If you hover over it, it will actually reveal the email address. So just check that. Then whatever you do, in line with what Jason's actually already said, never, ever open a hyperlink that is contained in an email. Purely and simply because, first and foremost, they are the most dangerous ways of introducing a virus onto your system or opening up your computer to being cloned. So please, please, please do not open any hyperlinks. There are a couple of other websites which I'd actually recommend to people to actually join on. One is a credit reference agency called Experian, because they will monitor your account or monitor you. And if anybody applies for any credit or what have you, they will actually cross-check that. If anybody does try to actually defraud you online, please report it to Action Fraud. With your emails, if you get a phishing email, which is quite simple, and you don't know who it's come from, but you found that the address is quite phony or anything else, you can actually forward that onto the NCSC by just forwarding it to report@phishing.gov.uk. I think so far they've actually had 23 million phishing emails intercepted, etc. And they've put over 9,000 or 10,000 phishers out of business, as it were. So it's well worth doing. However, the one thing which I have noticed, that particularly with some things, is that when you actually try to forward it using the email app that you have on your either your laptop or your computer, it doesn't really work. You've got to log on to your internet service provider or your email provider's website and then log on that and then forward it from there. I hope this is useful. As I say, it's caused me 4 months of absolute paranoia trying to make sure that everything that I can do is open and above board. So please, please, please don't open any hyperlinks. Thank you, Rodri.
Thank you, Mike. Thank you. Philip, I think I have you, and then Linda, I think you've indicated that you'd like to speak again. So Philip, go ahead.
Thank you, Chairman. Just wanted to ask Jason, I see you partner with a lot of public bodies, but have you done anything with the private sector to get their experience, but also to help them and increase the knowledge all round.
I think it's true to say that at the moment we don't have direct contacts into private sector, but certainly the NCSC, of course, runs across the board and interacts with a lot of private sector organisations as well. So there are kind of information feeds through that route. As a council, we are not currently connected directly to any sort of private sector organisations.
Any follow-up, Philip?
No, that's fine.
All right, thank you. And Linda?
Thank you, Chairman. I just wanted to pick up on Councillor Ian Martin's point about the phishing button not being there. I noticed that, and Bonnie and the IT department have been advised, but she didn't want us to forward the email in case it made it even worse. So I just literally read out to her what wasn't there. So they are up to date with that. Thank you.
Thank you, Linda. I don't see any other members who wish to make questions to Jason. I've thought of a few things that the Commission might want to consider around recommendations, although it is, of course, in the hands of members. But I think given that members brought this item to our attention and it is an item of urgent business, if the Commission were minded to make recommendations, I think that would be appropriate. The first point, which was raised by Councillor Kiddle-Morris and also Councillor Turner, was about audit committee recommendations and member online training. I would ask whether members would be minded to make a recommendation to the audit committee that it considers closely what recommendations continue not to have been fulfilled in relation to cybersecurity, and if it could ask for an audit of how many members and indeed officers have done their requested online training, so that we can see the level of compliance among what is effectively the front line. The second potential recommendation is that the member development panel consider whether further training might be helpful for members in relation to cybersecurity. And the third recommendation would be that the executive member provide a report perhaps early next year on any changes in the state of our cybersecurity measures that we have in place. But those are just ones that I wanted members to cogitate on. I'm not making those recommendations myself, so I will leave them to members as to whether or not they feel they're appropriate. Councillor Kiddle-Morris.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I think the first one you read out was very, very apposite, and I think I would make that recommendation to the Commission and look for a seconder. Thank you.
Thank you. And I think Councillor Kyburd wishes to speak.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Audit and governance are obviously concerned about the outstanding audit recommendations, and our independent member is vocally very concerned. So I would hope to see progress on catch up on that relatively soon.
And do we have a seconder for Councillor Kiddle-Morris's recommendation? Hilary. Hilary seconded. Are there any members who wish to speak on that recommendation? Seeing none, so for the avoidance of doubt, that is a recommendation from the committee that audit continue to scrutinise any recommendations that haven't been fulfilled in respect of cybersecurity, and also receive an audit as to how many members and officers have carried out their requisite online training in relation to cybersecurity. Can I see all members in favour, please? And any members against? I don't see any against. Please shout if I'm misrepresenting your views. And any abstentions? Again, I see no abstentions. So that is passed unanimously. Are there any members who wish to raise any other recommendations or points in relation to this item of urgent business? Councillor Bushell.
I agree with your second proposal, the member development panel. Running a training course on cybersecurity. That would go right across all the members. And I think that would be a very, very valuable exercise to be carried out. So I would like to see that go forward. Thank you.
Okay, I will take that as a proposal then. Are there any seconders for that recommendation? Councillor Turner, do you want to speak as well?
Yes, please. We've now got a redesignated member panel meeting set up for November. So Councillor Bushell and I will make sure that this item is on that agenda with the officers and the chairman, obviously, so that it can be given some good airing. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much. Can I see if there are any other members who wish to speak on this recommendation? I am seeing none, in which case could I please see all those members in favour of that recommendation, which for the avoidance of doubt is that the Member Development Panel consider further cyber training for members where appropriate. I have a number of hands in favour. Are there any against? Are there any abstentions? Terry, I don't want to pick you up. I didn't see your hand up in the first place. Did you vote on that?
Yes, I did, Chairman.
Okay, very good.
Just be very quick.
A very quick.
It's like a Mexican wave over here.
Excellent. I don't want to misrepresent your views. You know me. So that has passed unanimously. Are there any other recommendations that members would like to discuss or bring to the chair's attention? I am seeing none. Excellent. In which case, all I would ask of Jason is that if he's able to provide a written update to the Commission in respect of the interesting point raised about reporting Gmail accounts to Google, which I thought was very apposite, and also the mysterious disappearance of the phishing button. I think members would be very grateful for that. In which case, seeing no other members indicating, I will close that item and thank members for their hearty discussion of it. And also flag at this stage, the powers of items of urgent business are clearly quite broad, and I want members to feel confident that if there are other items that they think would fall within that, if they are happy to approach me and raise it, then if I think it can be brought as an item of urgent business as this one was, then I certainly will do my utmost to make sure that I do. That is all I have to say on that. So that ends item 4. Declarations of interest is item 5. Are there any declarations of pecuniary interest that members would like to make in relation to items on the agenda today? I am seeing none, which is to be expected given the nature of the items. So thank you very much. Moving on to item 6, non-members wishing to address the meeting. We don't have any non-members who specifically wish to address the meeting, with the exception, of course, of our flagship presentation and Housing Association presentations at item 8. Teresa, there isn't anything that I should be saying here that I've missed in terms of other non-members wishing to address the meeting, is there?
No, you're fine, Chairman, thank you.
Excellent. I always like that bit of reassurance as I move on to item 7. So Constitution, non-key officer decisions, CSIRO licensing, a report by Councillor Suggett, the Executive Member for Governance. Sarah, are you happy to kick off on that?
Thank you, Chair. I was going to, given the highly technical nature of the document, hand you straight over to Mark. I think I might slip up a bit more than I ought to if I try to explain it. So if it's okay, Chair, I'm going to hand this over to Mark Stinson to go through with you all.
Absolutely, with my blessing. Mark, please take it away.
Thank you very much, Chairman. First of all, Chairman, just to say that this report is brought before the Commission largely because the first recommendation in the report clearly has an impact on the powers of the Commission. The report has already been through the Governance and Audit Committee, and any comments that were made at Governance and Audit have been incorporated in the report that you've got before you. So, Chairman, I'll take five minutes or so just to run you through the key changes, then of course I'll be happy to take any questions. So the first issue on the report relates to the call-in powers of the Overview and Scrutiny Commission. There's a balance to be found between the speed of decision making and the rightful role of a scrutiny commission to scrutinise those decisions. The way that we deal with officer decisions, and this particular element relates to officer decisions, changed well, it has been changing since 2012. And the reason for that is that a set of regulations were enacted in 2012, which required all officer decisions to be published. Now, up until that point, Chairman, only key decisions made by officers required a formal public notice of the decision. But because of the way that we word our constitution, we don't refer to specifically officer decisions, member decisions, we talk about executive decisions. So by default, all officer decisions that are published are now subject to call-in. One of the issues that I've begun to see over recent years is that, well, first of all, the regulations lack some clarity in terms of where you draw the line as to what needs to be published and what doesn't need to be published. The regulations talk about a decision which is closely associated with an executive decision requires publication. So that would suggest it has to be something more than a minor or administrative decision. It's very difficult to draw that line. So my approach with officers has been, if in doubt, publish it. So I think those members who are perhaps longer standing members will perhaps have noticed an increase in the number of officer decisions that have been published. The downside to that, of course, is that a lot of pretty routine decisions cannot then be implemented for a 5 working day period whilst we wait to see whether or not there is a call-in. And also, Chairman, in my time in Breckland, I can only recall in the last 4 or 5 years one call-in which didn't relate to an officer decision at all. So we've got a large number of decisions that are potentially slowed down while we wait to see whether there's a call-in, and actually no call-ins have taken place. And I think it also, as we publish more and more non-key, lower level officer decisions, members may find that they're distracted from some of the more important decisions. So the suggestion in the report, Chairman, is that in terms of officer decisions, call-in be restricted to those decisions which are key officer decisions. That, of course, does not stop the Scrutiny Commission from scrutinising officer decisions after the fact. It only affects call-in. So were the Commission ever to have any concerns about the nature of the decisions that officers are making that aren't subject to call-in, you, of course, retain absolutely the power to call for action, and of course to propose subsequent changes to the Constitution. So, Chairman, that's the position in terms of the recommendation on call-in. The rest of the items I will take you through quickly, but they're fairly routine. So the first one relates to licensing. That's triggered by the fact that some animal welfare regulations were issued, and looking at those together with other regulations determines where they must sit in terms of which committees have powers to deal with them. We're suggesting, well, first of all, that the animal welfare regulations must come under the licensing committee, but we're also suggesting that where the law permits a choice between the executive and the non-executive, that actually any licensing function, which are very few and far between, that could be either executive or non-executive, our view is that those ought to sit under the licensing committee. Next, Chairman, we have shareholder and trustee issues. Now, these are legally executive matters. They can't be dealt with by another part of the decision-making of the authority. So, in a sense, we're just clarifying the position in the Constitution on that. Next, Chairman, we have signing of contracts and documents under seal. Again, that's a tidying up issue. It isn't clear currently in the contract procedure rules that actually the contract procedure rules apply to works, supplies and services contracts, and does not apply to things like, for example, an employment contract. So we're just tidying those up. And also, Chairman, making sure that where the contract procedure rules require that a contract is entered into as a deed, that we follow the necessary legal requirement, which is that the document states on its face that it is a deed. There's also a cross-referencing error, Chairman, in respect of delegations under the contract procedure rules. That was a change that was made some time ago at Council, but unfortunately it makes reference to a Rule 7.1, Rule 7.2, which should in fact be Rule 7.1. So that's just a cross-referencing amendment, which I wouldn't normally bring to another body before Council, but as we had a report coming to the Commission, we've included that. Next, Chairman, is the rules on vacation of office. So this is the 6-month rule, where if a member doesn't attend for a period of 6 months, then unless the Council authorises that in advance, the member's seat is vacated. The current wording of our Standing Order 56 doesn't fully reflect the legal position, because there is an additional requirement relating to executive members. So literally that has just been tidied up to reflect the relevant parts of the Local Government Act. Finally, Chairman, external grants. Currently, if a grant of more than £100,000 is offered to the authority, we take that through the executive, but also on to Council, because our financial procedure rules require it. Now, actually, there is a separation here between the authority to approve the acceptance of a grant, to approve its terms and conditions, and to approve the spend of that grant. All of those are by law executive functions. The only real role of the Council in approving one of those grants is where there's a need to make a variation to the budget. This, of course, often results in a situation, as we've had recently, where we're required to accept a grant within a very short timescale, otherwise the grant is no longer available, and we have to accept it via an executive decision, and then some weeks later, or potentially several weeks later, take it for second approval at Council. So the proposal that I'm making there, Chairman, is that as it only relates to a potential budget amendment, that that is only required if the Section 151 officer doesn't certify that the grant has a neutral effect on the budget. So in a situation where Christine Marshall or her deputy, Ali Chubbuck, if they, either of those individuals certify that the grant will have a neutral impact on the budget because it's literally an in and out transaction, in that situation, we would not require a subsequent Council decision. So, Chairman, I hope that's clear, but I'm more than happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much, Mark. I'm just reading paragraph 2.20, and it says, and I may read it and find that it's completely right, so bear with me because I was halfway through. Council decision. The rule is amended so that the Council decision to accept the grant and amend the budget is required in respect of any grant funding in excess of £100,000, except where the Section 151 officer certifies that the grant has a neutral impact on the budget. Should that not therefore be except where the 151 officer does not certify that the grant has a neutral impact on the budget, so that if it has a neutral impact, we don't need the Council decision?
No, Chairman, I think it is correct. So it's saying that a Council decision is required, except where the Section 151 officer certifies that the grant has a neutral impact on the budget.
Good. Okay, just testing. Excellent. In which case, I think everything sounded eminently sensible. I will defer to members if they have any further questions. I have Linda and Terry, and I can't see anyone else at this stage. So, oh, and Ian. So,
Mark Kiddle as well, so Chairman, and David Wickerson, sorry.
Okay, so let's go Linda, Terry, Ian, and then I'll do you mind messaging those two because I just didn't quite hear you. Linda, go. You go.
Thank you, Chairman. Mark, I just want to ask a technical question, which is all tied up with this, which is about the opening of tenders. Because at one point, members might have had a phone call or an email to say, if you're in the building, can you come and witness the opening of a tender? What's happening with that during COVID-19 with Elizabeth House shut down?
Chairman, I don't know the answer to that question. I can find out fairly quickly from my contracts team, and I will report back after the meeting if that's acceptable.
That's excellent. If you could just get an email circulated to the committee, that would be perfect. Linda, is that satisfactory? Good. Terry.
Thank you, Chairman. Just 2 points, if I may. Just on the Appendix E, the vacation of office, is there a reason why Cabinet members have their own paragraph? It just occurs to me that Cabinet members are first and foremost members of the Council, and therefore they should be included within the section above, as in, they need to attend a meeting of Council or Cabinet within that specified period. I'm all for trimming these things down if we possibly can, and it just seems a bit of a duplication to me. But there may be a specific reason why there's a whole another paragraph. The one I really object to, as you might appreciate, is the amendments to the calling procedures. It's my view that actually in a cabinet system, there are quite limited opportunities for the opposition and indeed backbench members to hold the executive to account. So I would obviously be against any watering down of those powers. There already exists a process by which decisions can be exempt from calling. We've had numerous ones over the last few months where the timeline has been tightened because the need exists, and you've been involved in that, Chairman, as Chair of Scrutiny. So there is a process by which urgent or more urgent decisions can be processed quicker, which I welcome. I would ask why we need this, because as Mark Stinson just mentioned, we don't call in things often. We certainly haven't called in many officer decisions, and we certainly haven't been calling in many key decisions either. So there should be sufficient capacity for the process as is currently written. The key driver for me seems to be to speed up or to remove the 5-day potential delay in decision making. My view would be that actually any decisions that are made should be properly planned and considered, and officers and cabinet members should factor in that 5-day potential wait when they're making decisions. I don't generally support a rush to make things decisions quickly. Actually, I believe in proper scrutiny and accountability, and that should be factored into the decision-making process, particularly when we have a means by which we can bypass the process when an emergency or when a need arises. So on that particular one, I'm not satisfied that actually that's needed, Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Terry. I am going to ask Mark to come back on the point in relation to cabinet members and the vacation of seats. I'd also ask, because I know there was a little bit of confusion earlier in the year, although of course no members fell foul of that rule, about what constituted a meeting of the local authority in respect of counting for their attendance. Because I think there was some discussion about whether or not they had to attend a meeting of which they were themselves a member of the committee, as opposed to any meeting of the local authority. So if you could just address those 2 points, then I think we might have a wider discussion of Terry's point around scrutiny call-in powers, because of course that is the item most pertinent in this report to us. So Mark.
Thank you, Chairman. So the reason that we've separated out executive members from other members is because all members have to comply with the first part, including executive members, but there are additional obligations on members of the executive. That's why it's shown as a separate sub-paragraph in Standing Order 56. So a member of the Cabinet must either attend a meeting of the Cabinet or must make an executive decision in any given 6-month period, as well as attend a meeting of the authority. So it's an additional burden on an executive member, which is why it's been separated out, so that members who are not a member of the executive have got a clear rule, and members of the cabinet have got 2 clear rules. In terms of those meetings at which count in terms of attendance, I mean, there is a long list of those in Standing Order 56. So, for example, attendance at a body to which that member has been appointed as an outside body representative would count. But attendance at a meeting of which that member is not a member is unfortunately a subject of debate. So some authorities consider it does count, some authorities consider that it doesn't count, and unfortunately there doesn't appear to be, in fact I don't think there's any case law on it. So my view is I prefer to adopt the line with least risk, but that I may be overly risk averse in that situation. But unfortunately, we do not have any clear position in law on that.
Thank you, Mark. So 2 points arising from that then. Firstly, just to clarify, if a cabinet member were not to manage to meet the second burden under the Constitution, they would only cease presumably to be a cabinet member, not an entire member of the council. Is that correct?
I would need to go and double check, but my understanding, Chairman, is that it's all part of Section 85, which is actually that the seat of the member will become vacant. So I don't believe it's restricted specifically to membership of the cabinet.
Whilst I do believe in holding cabinet to a higher standard, given what they need to do, I do feel that might be a rather harsh interpretation of the rules, given that a normal member would not suffer the same impact. So that would be great to have some clarity on that. And then the other thing I would ask, if members agree, is that we provide some clarity in that first rule, which outlines either your Conservative position that they must attend a meeting of which they are a member of the committee in order to fulfil that, or we outline the second rule clearly that they can attend any member, because whilst I note that you say there is no case law, and of course it is not certain what a court's interpretation of this would be, it would be nice to know that our Constitution at least was clear in what we thought members should be doing in order to meet their requirements. Would that be possible?
Chairman, in effect, I have done that. So I haven't referred to attending as a non-member of a committee. I will revisit the wording though, Chairman.
Yes, well, especially in light of if your view is that the Conservative interpretation is the one that this council is in fact adopting or would like to adopt, then I think that Conservative wording should be reflected, because we're at risk of having a situation where a member didn't attend under your Conservative ruling, but then we would have a debate in the council internally, far be it any judicial process, where they would say, I attended a meeting of the local authority. You would say, by that I meant a meeting of which you were a member of the committee. And they would say, well, that's not clear in the Constitution, so you couldn't vacate their seat anyway. So it would, yes, I would welcome a revisiting of that wording if that is possible. So what I'm going to do, because we still have quite a few other people who wish to speak first, I'm going to go to Ian, then Mark, then David, and then I think we should circle back round to Terry's substantive point around the powers of scrutiny in this report, and hopefully we can knock off any other points ahead of that. Would that be in order with members? Not that it matters because it's my decision. Excellent. Ian, go ahead.
Well, my comments, Chairman, are related to the call-in, so...
Okay, well, we'll hold those back then. Thank you. Mark?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I'm afraid Terry Jeremy has stolen my thunder on the executive, the cabinet member. I personally can't see the need for that. However, if the Commission decides that should stay in, there is in paragraph 56.4, there is a should instead of a shall, because the same paragraph that refers to members has a shall in it rather than a should.
Very good. I will let Mark cogitate on the deeper meaning of the should versus shall conundrum. And David.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. In a lot of these sort of legalese type things, a lot depends on definitions of words and everything else. And being a fairly newbie, so to speak, Mark, was there any conversation that went ahead with regards to the actual definition of a key decision? Because all of these, I mean, in that particular aspect, it all relates around what is or what is not a key decision. Were there any changes, in fact, in the conversation that's been had with regards to the change of what is and what is not a key decision? Thank you.
Mark, are you able to come back on that point?
Certainly, Chairman, thank you. Currently, the law defines a key decision as a decision which has a significant impact on the communities in 2 or more locations within the district, or has a significant financial impact. So we've got a very clear definition, with the exception, in my view, of the financial levels. Now, the reason I say that is because at the moment, the financial level is taken as being 25% of a relevant budget. That is not, in my view, clearly, sufficiently clearly defined. So it would be my intention at a future point to bring a further report on. We've got a number of other issues which I would like to pick up constitutionally. One of those will be to discuss the way we define a financial key decision, as I think it would be better for everybody if that was to be defined as a fixed figure rather than a percentage of a relevant budget. So yes, a key decision is defined in law, but we do have an element of discretion around the financial thresholds.
Thank you, David. Do come back.
Yeah, excuse me. Sorry, if I may come back, Mark, on that, because on Breckland's own website, if I may quote, a key decision incurring expenditure, generating income, or making savings in any single financial year above the capital expenditure threshold or the revenue expenditure threshold currently laid down by the council. So on the website, there is in fact no mention of percentiles whatsoever. It's just exceeding the capital expenditure threshold, whatever that may be. Maybe that is the percentage that you mentioned. But I think in order to make a valued decision about this sort of thing, we really do need to have a distinct definition so that we can then make a distinct opinion as to whether we go with that or not. Thank you.
Thank you, David. I don't think we're going to get more clarity than we've already had from Mark on the meaning of a key decision, if that's okay for the purpose of this debate. But I'm sure he notes your point. We'll go back to Ian as the next person to speak on the point around the powers of scrutiny, and then I'll take any further comments from members on that.
Thank you, Chairman. I must admit, when listening to the rationale for the removing the call-in for non-key officer decisions, one of them was that we may be seeing quite a lot of decisions being published, and we may not be able to distinguish, or it may get lost in there, that there may be some important ones in amongst the non-key ones. As a new person to all this, I haven't been particularly overwhelmed by the number of decisions that have been notified. I've taken a few moments to look at each one to decide whether it's one I need to investigate further. So I'm not sure of that rationale, and I have to admit, the idea of to do this so as to remove a 5-day lag doesn't sit comfortably with me in terms of forward planning and in terms of actually making decisions, especially as there is a route to be able to bypass call-in with your agreement. So yeah, I'm not persuaded on this particular one at the moment.
Thank you, Ian. Are there any other members who wish to speak on this matter? Otherwise, I will give my tuppence worth. I don't see anyone else. So all I would say is, and I am generally extremely sympathetic to ensuring that the powers of scrutiny are as significant as possible, understandably, in my position. I agree with Ian's point and the one that Terry made, slightly less powerfully, but nonetheless the same, around the conflation of less and more important decisions in that list being a problem for members. I think most members are sufficiently well versed, and in the event that they're not sufficiently able to make themselves well versed, that they could identify what they regard as the most important decisions and ones that are much less important. I do, however, have more sympathy than Terry and Ian both have on the 5-day lag point. And the reason I say this is because whilst, of course, it is absolutely possible that Mark or another officer can write to me and say, will I waive call-in for a particular decision? That's a minimum of a day if, you know, everything goes swimmingly, and is also another layer of bureaucracy that isn't, I think, necessary when we're talking about decisions that are not key. I note Mark's point that there was only one call-in in the last, I don't know how many years. And whilst, again, I don't think that that is decisive, because scrutiny may well find something that it needs to call in tomorrow, it is pertinent. And I don't think it's likely that there are many decisions which are non-key that we need to have this extra level of power over. So I am sympathetic to the idea that we reduce the bureaucracy where we can in respect of council decision making. I take the point about forward planning, but I think if we're saving a week, then that is a week saved, and people often complain legitimately about how slow local authorities are in being able to carry out their business. So I am supportive of the amendment, but I caveat that with scrutiny has very significant powers to call in basically anything. As we've already seen, we have items of urgent business, we have councillor call-in powers, we have a number of other powers under the Constitution, and we can call in any executive decision. I don't think that this amendment would materially reduce our ability to scrutinise any issue that we thought was pertinent to our work plan, but I do think it would result in a moderate improvement in council processes. So on balance, I am supportive, but it is a matter, and I will take a vote from members on whether or not we're supportive of that particular amendment, because I think it's one that is clearly of divided opinion at the moment. Are there any other members who wish to speak on that amendment? Mark.
Chairman, thank you for your comments, and apologies.
Different Mark.
I have to confess I missed most of that.
Which Mark do you want, Chairman?
Oh, sorry, that was Mark Kiddle-Morris I wanted, so you, yes.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I agree with what you've just articulated. I think there is a way to get any non-key officer decisions brought before the OSC, should we decide to do that after the implementation of that decision. And I think that to me is sufficient scrutiny to make sure that we are doing our job, looking after the interests of our residents and the council.
Thank you, Mark. Are there any other members who wish to speak on this? I don't see any. What I will do then, to be absolutely fair and above board, is I'd like to invite Terry to propose that we reject this part of the report and ask it to be revisited. And I will ask Ian if he wishes to second that. And we will then vote on that proposal so that we have a clear decision for the minutes if both of those members are happy with that course of action. Terry, is that in order?
Yes, that's fine, Chairman. I appreciate it's largely theoretical, but I think it's important. I'm happy with all the recommendations other than A, so I'm happy to propose an amendment that A is deleted.
Thank you. And Ian, are you happy to second that?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so could I see all those in favour of that recommendation. That is that the amendment proposed at Part A is rejected by the committee. I see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yeah, I have 5 in favour. And can I see all those against, please? And that is 1, 2, 3. Thank you. And sorry, Linda, I didn't see your vote. Did you vote in favour of rejection or against, or are you abstaining?
No, I voted first in
Fine,
favour
right,
of the
got
amendment.
it. So that was
Yeah.
actually 6-3 then. So that recommendation is carried. If members are happy, then I will also accept nods, I think, for us to accept the rest of the report. Yes, members, I don't see any dissent there. In which case, I thank the committee for its decision. And Teresa, if you could make a note that we've recommended that A is deleted, but all of the other amendments are acceptable. And of course, I hope that Mark has noted the earlier points around revisiting the wording around meetings of the local authority and the rather harsh treatment of cabinet members under our current constitution. Are there any other points that members want to make on this report? Seeing none. Mark or Sarah, are there any final comments you want to make before I close this item? Seeing
No,
none.
Chairman, I might just, sorry. So as this has already been through governance and audit, and obviously a different view has arisen in Overview and Scrutiny Commission, I would just need to think about how I word the final report to make it clear that this was a recommendation which was not supported at Overview and Scrutiny Commission, as opposed to simply removing the recommendation if members are comfortable with that. I think it needs to be made clear to council that this was a proposal that was put to Overview and Scrutiny Commission but was not supported.
No, that's absolutely understandable, yes, because we aren't the final arbiters on this, so thank you. Okay, excellent. In which case, I thank members for their time and hearty discussion of that item, and we will move on to the real feast of the day, which is the presentations by our Housing Association colleagues. I think Alison is going to give us a short introduction, after which I think Teresa will arrange for the presentations to be done. So, Alison.
Thank you, Chairman. Okay, hello everybody. Today's presentation, as you know, is from the RSL, which is the Registered Social Landlords, who you're called in. However, as Councillor Wickerson said, we've got some newbies on the council, or fairly newbies now, and we've also got some new members of the housing team, which I wanted to take this opportunity to introduce you to. On another note, the presentation today, obviously questions will be aimed at the social providers, not the housing team. However, if you did need to request that the housing team comes in at another day, we're very willing to come along and answer any questions you might have. So at this stage, I'm going to hand over to Jill Duffy and Daniel Duffy, same similar name, but not quite spelt the same. Jill is the new housing manager and Daniel is the new strategic housing manager. I don't know what I'm doing with the staff, Chairman, but they seem to be leaving me. Anyhow, we've got two new ones in who I'd like to introduce you to. Thank you.
Thank you, Alison.
Hello. So as Councillor Webb said, I'm Jill Duffy. I'm the new housing manager. She's not going to be getting rid of me for a while, I'm afraid. I'm going to be here for quite a long time. That's my intention anyway. And I'm really happy to be here. Just a little introduction to me and the team as background. As you'll know, Breckland Council transferred its housing stock, its council housing stock, quite a long time ago, I think over 20 years ago actually. So although we don't own our own council houses except for some temporary accommodation, we do still have a statutory housing duty. So Daniel and I, our teams cover the statutory duty. So I'll just explain a little bit about my areas. There's 3 key areas. The first one is the private sector housing team, and their main focus is on increasing the standard of all the housing stock in the district, ensuring that our landlords act legally and safely, and also assisting people to stay in their own homes where adaptations might be needed. The second focus is on housing advice. So that's providing advice and early intervention to prevent and reduce homelessness and also the impact that it has on people. And then the third main area is assessing applications for the housing register and working with our partner housing associations, also known as registered providers, to ensure that those with the greatest housing need are offered affordable housing to rent. So that's just a quick overview of the work of my team, and I'll hand over to Daniel for his area.
Thank you, Jill. Go ahead, Daniel.
Thank you, and yes, I'm the one with the Scottish.
Oh, Daniel, you're extremely quiet at the moment. So quiet as I can't hear you. Not yet. You're now on mute. Try speaking now. No, we're not getting you. We may have to leave your introductions due to this technical breach, but no doubt we can ensure that an email is circulated where you can give us maybe 2 or 3 A4 pages on your background, maybe 4 or 5, 6 or 7, depending on how you're feeling, or a short paragraph will do. That's great. Thank you, Daniel. And I think, Teresa, are we now ready for the presentations from Justin and Adrian?
Yes, Chairman, both Adrian and Justin are have joined the meeting, and so both of them should be able to share their screens, but we have it on standby if needs be. I don't know, Chairman, if you've got a particular housing association that you wish to go first?
Well, we'll go in alphabetical order then. I don't look biased, I suppose. So, Justin, I guess if you start us off, but I'm in your debt as what you'd like to do next.
Okay, hopefully you can hear me.
Yes.
Brilliant, excellent. So I'm now going to attempt to share my screen with you, share my presentation. If you could just let me know. Hopefully you should be able to.
Yes, we can now see it. Thank you.
Brilliant. Okay. So good morning, everybody. My name is Justin O'Connor. I am the Head of Asset Management for Broadland Housing. What I intend to do, I've got 10 minutes to give you a brief overview of Broadland, and I have also been provided with some questions. I hope to cover as many questions that I have been provided with prior to this meeting. On this front screen, you can see one of the schemes in the Breckland District Council, which was handed over in October 2019 of 31 affordable houses in Watton. If you bear with me, Okay, so the background to Broadland Housing, we're a traditional housing provider which was formed in 1963. Most of our properties or homes were purpose built within that period of time. And I've just provided a couple of quotes here from our website, which I thought really summarise what Broadland Housing is about. So we do more than simply build houses. At the end of the day, our business is about people, helping to create thriving neighbourhoods and communities. And we want to continue building great living environments where our tenants have real choice and real control. I think that's a really important point to mention. So this is a snapshot in where you can find our homes. Apologies, because there's just a slight delay every time I change the page, so please bear with me. Broadland Housing own and manage approximately 5,300 properties in the Norfolk and North Suffolk area. Within the Breckland District Council area specifically, we own and manage 593 homes. And you can see, hopefully you can see on this map here, the different coloured pinpoints, if you like, and that represents the 5 different geographical areas in terms of the way we operate our services. So we will have a dedicated multidisciplinary team working out of each of those areas. That includes specialists in both housing and the property sector, and we also work with external agencies quite closely to deliver our services also. What is really useful to know is in regards to the geographical patches, we also have a dedicated operatives who we talk about frontline services, and often we talk about contacting the organisation to speak or communicate to people, where actually we have operatives who are employed directly by Breckland Housing, who carry out predominantly repairs, who are in people's homes on a day-to-day basis. So we train our operatives to be our eyes and ears also in terms of tenancy management, for safeguarding issues, and to get a better understanding and communications between our tenants and the organisation. So this is just a snapshot in regards to how we maintain our homes. So as I was alluding to, we've carried out over 20,000 repairs for the 2019-20 financial years. And like I said, it just gives a better indication in terms of how frequently we are entering into people's homes. There are two key aspects in regards to maintaining our homes, which depend on legislation. They include the Climate Change Act and also the Equality Act, so that we are the environmental factors in regards to our homes, improving the energy efficiency of our homes is really important. We aim to get our homes up to energy efficiency rating of A over the next 30 years. The general rating at the moment is an energy rating of C. One of the key ways we do that is by improving the fabric of the building and installing retrofit energy efficiency savings such as solar PV panels. We also have a budget which we carry out adaptation requests. So these could be things like level access showers. We have a standard design specification for fitting lever taps, for example. And for our sheltered schemes, we will carry out Equality Act surveys. So we look at having level access around the building, making sure that there's a free access passageway to individual homes within those buildings. We also, when we carry out refurbishment works, look to carry out the works so that it is adaptable moving forward. So what I mean by that is if we, for example, have installed a level access shower into a home, we will look at the plumbing arrangements within that home. So at a future date, if the level access shower is not required and an overbath is required in its place, then the plumbing is arranged so that makes that whole process a lot easier. So kind of saying that the bathroom in this example is a lot more adaptable to change to our tenants' needs. But it's not just about bricks and mortar. It's really important that actually it's about the communities of where people lives. So the photograph that you see here at the moment, we've got various different examples of different types of housing that suit different people's needs. And it's really also important to point out that actually we carry out an interview process above also the allocations process that is in place in regards of the suitability of the homes for those individuals to try and get that balance as right as best as we can. But it's really important, like I alluded to earlier, that we have communities, the right facilities in place and the right local amenities to make sure that those tenancies are sustainable. Okay, so Breckland Housing is really proud of its tenancy support. So I know there was a number of questions in regards to how we manage our tenancies. We tend to look at it more so from a tenancy support perspective. And the image that you can see is one that I'm really proud of on Breckland's behalf. So one of the key areas and partnerships that we are signed up to is the Homes for Cafe initiative to help prevent homelessness. And what you can see from this graphic here is the number of evictions that we have for rent arrears, which has reduced significantly. And also what's interesting is you would expect possibly that our rent arrears would increase as a result of that. But what we've actually found that by having a dedicated tenancy support teams who will be involved from the outset of all new sign-ups, and for anybody who is moving into a new home for the first time, it will be mandatory that as part of your sign-up process that we will have tenancy support with you there from the outset. We'll also have a training and employment advisor to help with support, which we find works really well. And for some of our shelter, well, for all of our sheltered schemes, we pride ourselves on being one of the few organisations to have full-time scheme managers employed directly by Breckland Housing. In regards to our services, this is an interesting one because although we were on a digital services shift as a result of the COVID lockdown, it's probably accelerated the way that we deliver our services, and there's been a significant shift towards the digital sides. And this slide here shows you a number of tenants and people who work for Breckland Housing and the number of meetings and conversations that we have now, similar to the meeting we're having now, that have taken a digital format. For our customers, we have developed further our technology. So we have an app called Tenants Online, whereby tenants can look at essential information regarding their tenancies, but they can also pay their rent. They can actually register repairs online, and they can also schedule their repairs. What's really useful as well is by that channel shift, it also allows us to focus our time on our tenants who are not able to use our digital services for whatever reason, and use our resources to offer more support in that respect. And we're also pleased to announce that as a result of the digital shift, we now have over 2,000 of our tenants who are signed up to Tenants Online. In regards to communication, well, what I would say, the best way to, if you want general information in regards to Breckland, then please do visit our website because it has a wealth of information about Breckland Housing, and also it includes various publications, i.e. our day-to-day publications that goes out to all of our tenants. It's available online, but it's also available where we mail shop that out to all of our tenants, and there are various different sections from development opportunities to vacancies to policies. It's a really useful source of information. We have a number of community engagement groups. So we have a tenant action group. We have a homes panel who deal specifically in the maintenance repairs of the organisation. And we also do community conversations, which unfortunately we did these at local area offices or in community halls around our operating area, but due to coronavirus, that has since taken a digital platform. So it's still live, it's still actively something that we're involved in, and it's involves senior members of staff, but we still engage and go out to all of the communities and have community conversations, which primarily focus on what we do well and what we could improve on. In regards to customer relationship management, so in anybody who contacts us, the details are logged on a central system. So regardless of whether it's a repair, it could be antisocial behaviour, all of these details are recorded on record against each of our tenancies. So we have a historical log of all of the events in regards to everything that's been reported to us. And one key thing that I did really want to point out is in regards to complaints. So it's to be mindful that there is a new housing complaints code, a housing ombudsman new complaints code, and those changes, the new changes in regards to that code involve a new two-stage process for landlords to subscribe to. They also include the timescale, so a shorter timescale as possible to respond to those complaints. Broadland will have a central line of communication for complaints, so a dedicated team and persons who will be involved in any complaints. But it's also worth noting that the Ombudsman has a dedicated support advisor service also. So at any point in time, if somebody makes a complaint towards the landlord, they can also have additional support from the Housing Ombudsman. And then finally, it's just to say that we also have a joined up approach. So we have a strand in our values, which includes a collaborative approach, and we will work in equal partnerships with others to deliver our objectives. And here are a number of local partners and national partners that we work closely with in terms of delivering our objectives. And that concludes my presentation. So thanks very much for listening, and I hope it all made sense to you.
Thank you very much, Justin. That's really helpful. I won't take members' questions at this stage because I want to give Broadland flagship a fair crack of a whip. So if we could go straight on to the second presentation, and then we will have members' questions covering both, if that is satisfactory.
Okay, you're right for me to start, Chair.
Yes, sorry, absolutely,
Thank
Adrian. Yes,
Thank
go
you.
ahead.
Good morning. Yes, it still is. Just check that. My name's Adrian Barber. I'm relatively new to Flagship Group. I started in February, and I mean it's a really good time to have this conversation because we're in a point of exciting change at Flagship. We're really looking forward to a new direction, and I thought we'd share some of that with you this morning. It's quite important really to sort of almost, I could say, ditto to what Justin has shared with you. So we've tried not to replicate too much of that in terms of what we do as landlords, because we are very much the same in the way we approach things. But I'll now try and share my screen and not keep you too long. I've just got to work out which screen it is I need to share with you. That one.
That's worked, Adrian, you'll be pleased to hear.
That's excellent. Okay, so I thought I'd just share, because I believe there are some newer members, just a very quick history. You were right, the transfer of stock in Breckland took place in 1993 to Peddars Way, which later became part of the Flagship Group. But in more recent times, very recent times, many of you probably will have known that Victory Housing Trust from North Norfolk joined the group and brought just over 5,000 homes into the group. And just over a year later, Suffolk Housing also joined. That's where I was an interim chief executive, so brought those properties into the organisation, and they largely work in Suffolk, but do have some stock in Breckland and of course in Norfolk itself. So now Flagship Group is about 32,000 homes covering most boroughs across the east of England. So what are we like in Breckland? Well, you are our largest borough in terms of the stock we hold. We've got about 6,500 general needs sheltered and other properties, and about 250 market rent and shared ownership properties in the area. You are a key partner for us in terms of new builds. We've got a plan to build about 85 new homes in 2021-22 and about 100 in 22-23 as things currently stand. COVID seems to affect everybody's figures. We won't get into that. That's our plan at the moment. Hopefully we will continue to be able to deliver that and potentially grow it. We do know that the stock requires investment. A good example probably is the regeneration challenges for the Abbey estate, but I know that again we're working very closely with you on that, and I think it's a great example of joined up working where we're trying to bring organisations and quite substantial organisations together to talk about how do we deal with challenges for communities such as that. But we're not forgetting there are challenges for rural communities, and there is the ageing population. One of the members very much raised that, and it is a challenge that we're all going to need to get a hold of. We're doing some research at the moment about what does that look like? Because we're certainly not getting demand from any of our local authority partners to have sheltered housing. So what is the future of housing provision for the ageing population, and of course keeping rural communities going? We also know there's fuel poverty in the area, and the digital services agenda is quite a challenge. It's proven to be incredibly valuable during COVID to be able to contact people, and our customers have said it's that they've loved that proactive contact and just speaking to somebody. They're less bothered about the fact that we can't come into their homes and visit them in their homes at the moment, and we're learning a lot of lessons from that. That that personal contact is really important, and the digital agenda, yes, has a role to play in enabling people to access services 24/7, but we mustn't forget that people want to speak to people. So we're really keen to look at how we continue to deliver that. That hasn't come out. Where's that? Oh, somebody's put some whizzy stuff on that one. So in terms of our future, because we've come together and we've brought two new organizations in, there was a risk that we became very big and very disconnected from local communities, and we felt that that was a danger that we weren't prepared to allow to happen. So what we've been doing and we're working on right now is creating 3 housing associations, in effect, although they'll all be under flagship, of about 10,000 homes. So Victory Housing will be responsible for most of Norfolk and a large part of Breckland. Because Breckland is actually such a big local authority for us, we have divided that so that the south, if you like, of Breckland is going to be dealt with by the Suffolk Housing Organisation, and the north will be dealt with by myself. It'll be my area of responsibility. But what we want to create is a really strong local connection, and that includes connections with local councillors and local decision makers. So I mean, I've got plans to meet with Jill and Daniel. We haven't had a chance to catch up. I've just come back from 2 weeks leave, so we would have done otherwise before this meeting, but I'm looking forward to doing that and having that chat. But we're going to enter a time of doing an awful lot of analysis about what's going on in our communities. We know that there are huge challenges coming over the horizon. There's some already there, and we feel we need to know the people and the communities we're working in far better than we do. So we've got a piece of work got to happen there. But we're also looking to work much more collaboratively. So we talk about modern methods of construction, the digital agenda, complex cases, the housing crisis. We've been working very closely with your teams on how do we house people during COVID, and allowing direct lets and the like. We will have the 10,000 home organisations. We will have local boards still, and on the Victory local board, there is an equal number of resident members to independent members. So we have a normal complement of 5 residents and 5 independents on our board, or 5 made up of members of flagships like myself. So there is an equal decision making there. And the local teams, we are going to be, and we're not expecting to go live until perhaps December, and we will of course send out a lot more information before we go live, so you know who to contact, what's going on, and of course to our residents as well. But we want to reset relationships. We want to have a much closer relationship with residents so that they have the opportunity to talk to us in a way they want to talk. We want to make it as simple as possible for residents to access their services, and much more tailoring. So the digital agenda and capturing data is going to be really important to us going forward. Housing Made Simple is one of those things. It's about making it easy for customers to pay their rent, making it easy for them to move in and out, and making it easy for them to speak to us. So an example might be a very simple app that really takes away a lot of the form filling that we feel we need to do, a lot of the paperwork that we feel we need to do, and really puts it on a footing that you can get service like Amazon and others. And that really should be an aspiration for us to deliver that simplicity
for our residents. So that's a huge focus for us over the next 2 years, is really rolling out a more sophisticated digital agenda. In terms of development, there were some questions around what we develop. You've got a scheme here, which is an example of one, but we will obviously be talking to Daniel and Jill about some of the future needs. We'll want to identify those before we submit any planning applications, so we know that we are building what you need. It does include the size of and type of tenure. So it's not all social housing or affordable housing. There is shared ownership and so on. As I mentioned, we aren't being asked for sheltered housing, but it is going to be something we need to deal with as together, really, in terms of the ageing population. All of our new homes, of course, meet building regulation standards, but we focus much more on energy efficiency, a bit like Julian mentioned earlier. You know, this is about making sure the homes are cheap as possible to run. So the energy performance certificate is much higher. We are putting in, rather than gas central heating and oil heating, we're putting in airflow. I can't remember the name of it now. It's not terrible. Air source heat pumps, that's the one, which are much cheaper to run. So we have a program of doing that, and we're finding, of course, that is putting money in our residents' pockets directly, because they're not having to pay out for heating their homes. We also have a big investment program, for example, putting in 700 new bathrooms, 200 air source heat pumps, about 1,500 gas boilers and heating systems where air source heat pumps aren't appropriate. We've got an insulation program. We're replacing over 250 windows, 1,000 new doors, and so on and so forth. Of course, we could go into a lot more detail if members would be interested in that, and I'd be happy. If there are members that have a particular interest in an area, I'd be more than happy to chat to them, or to arrange some sessions to bring you up to date on a lot more detail of what we're doing in certain areas. There is also the planned maintenance program. Again, Julian touched on that, so I don't want to unduly repeat, because we will do the same sorts of improvements as a landlord. So really, more to come from us. It is a time of change. I will be the main contact in terms of being responsible for the services that our customers receive in Breckland going forward. I will be the main point. We will be putting a new team together. We will be putting in local teams, so that there is a local connection. We will be requiring those local teams to have great links with local councillors and other members and our residents, so that they completely understand what's going on in those areas. We want them to know it better than anybody else, really, because we can't deliver services unless we really understand that. So we will be sending out a lot more detail about who are your local contacts, the different ways you can contact us. We would ask that if you do have complaints to make, or you do have an inquiry directly, that you do go through our learning and resolution service. We'll make sure we can send that out to you. The reason for that is that we can track it. If you go to individuals, it's very hard for us to check and challenge and make sure that you're getting the quality of response you should get, and that you are getting a response. So I would encourage that. But of course, there will be times when we would just want to talk to each other, which is fine. We'll make sure you can do that. We will be updating the service standard packs, because you'll appreciate putting 3 organisations together does mean there are different standards, and we don't want that. So we're currently working on making sure there is a single standard. So, for example, if we let a home, that everybody gets the same standard, whether it's a flagship home, a Victory home, or a Suffolk home. We have a detailed stock list. I'm more than happy to provide that, obviously anonymised. It will show you what stock we have in the area, and I'll ask the teams to do a bit more work on that over the time. Won't be immediate, but perhaps we can get it for local councillors who are specifically interested in an area. If you let me know, we can get that organised. And there are a number of questions. I couldn't possibly cover them all today. We have updated them. I have got something I can send
that will give you answers if they aren't covered in a moment. But that's it from me.
Thank you very much, Adrian. That was very helpful as well. I will open the floor to members. Can I see anyone who wishes to ask a question of our two Housing Association presenters, Ian and then Fabian?
Thank you,
Go ahead, Ian.
Chairman, and thank you to both presentations, very much appreciated. Where I am and covering the Mastershall area, as far as I'm aware, it is primarily flagship, and so my questions or comments are aimed at flagship, I'm afraid. The frustration at the moment, everything sounds great that's coming. There is a huge frustration at the moment. I would have thought it was unacceptable in this day and age that elderly people living in homes that their sewage backs up when there happens to be heavy rain might be something that a housing association might be concerned about. But it doesn't seem to be happening. And in my own village, this is repeatedly happening and has been notified to flagship, has been raised, we've had site meetings, and things haven't happened. How do I take this forward? How do I actually help my local residents to achieve some decent housing in the 21st century? Thank you.
I will let Adrian or Daniel, not Daniel, sorry, I've lost you, Broadland, but I'll let you choose between the, oh, Justin, there you are. I'll let you choose between the two of you who wants to give first answer on that.
Yeah, thank you. As Councillor Martin rightly says, it will be a responsibility for me to take away from the meeting. I don't know the specific details of that case. I apologise. Could that be sent to me and then I can come back to Councillor Martin directly, because I don't have the details to hand. But of course, I mean, of course, that's not something we would expect to be happening. Is it a new build, can I ask?
No, this is an estate that was built in the 1960s. And this is a problem which was first brought to my attention at the beginning of this year, but appears to be a long-standing one.
Okay, thank you. But yes, if I could be sent those details,
if I could just then follow up, because again, you've been talking about digital agenda, you've been responding. I had to sit on the phone for 40 minutes 3 weeks ago, to get any response. And I'm told by the RFT person I met, typical wait times are 20 minutes. That's in this day and age, given that every phone number, in fact, there is only one phone number currently, and whether it's an emergency or anything else, has to go through your central number, and it's not answered. And that I really do. You know, as I say, all the future stuff sounds great, but until some of the basics are done, there's real levels of concern. And that afternoon, I tried to get hold of the local housing officer. Mobile phone was turned off. I tried the Northern Area housing officer or housing manager, no response. So apologies, but as far as I can see, flagship needs to do a lot of the basics, and so on based on the experience I have locally. Thank you.
Thank you, Ian. So I am obviously all in favour of robust challenge to our guests. Where members have particular issues which are specific to their ward, I think it's likely that Justin and Adrian are unlikely to be able to answer those questions directly. So I might request that members, if they have those specific issues, such as the first one that you mentioned, Ian, if they could let Teresa know and we can have them circulated. And I think they should be known to Scrutiny, but I don't necessarily think that we need the questions at this point. Your question about telephone communication, of course, was completely on point, and that is the sort of question that I think is legitimately put. Is that fair, Adrian? Are you happy with that?
That's absolutely fair. It's an absolutely fair challenge. It isn't anywhere near the standard we want. The difficulty, any answers I give are going to sound like excuses, but ultimately we don't want this to be the case. the practicalities are, through COVID and other issues, we were 8 members of staff down in that service, and it isn't a straightforward case of simply employing people and then putting them on the phones. We are trying very hard to bring new people in and get them trained up as quickly as possible. We're also trying to look at where we can bring in resources from other parts of the business to increase our capacity. It is largely to do with the RFT contact centre. You will find that if you phone the standard response number, which is for non-repairs issues, wait times are around 45 seconds. So it is largely attributable to repairs, but I do understand volumes have been particularly high since we came out of COVID, so we are trying to catch up. I mean, I can only take it on the chin and say we are doing what we can, and absolutely it's recognised at the most senior levels that it is not meeting the standards we need at the moment.
Thank you, Adrian. I'll come back to you later, Ian, if you have further points, but I have Fabian, Philip, then Gordon, then David currently on my list, and Terry. So Fabian, if you want to go next, could anyone else who wants to speak just indicate, and I'll keep Linda I've got, and I'll keep scrolling through. So Fabian, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. I just want to take this opportunity to ask one question primarily to Adrian. I asked a quick sort of ideas for questions or what was concerning residents within my ward. One of the things is they always, and it's principally non-flagship residents, is how do they rent a garage? They said there's no contact, and a lot of the villagers do want the garage. They said they seem to be neglected and empty. They can't rent them. And they said they've tried and no avail. So that just seems a bit pointless, particularly when I'd like to get some cars actually off the road and parked up in places. And to keep it general on the point, obviously all councillors, we only get to hear the complaints about a housing association. But if we want to resolve something and help you and help ourselves, can you not designate someone to have a councillor contact email or something? So we haven't got to go through all that paraphernalia of dealing with what someone else has dealt through that contact. So we've got a direct contact to say, we have this problem in our ward. Can you look into it and can you sort it? And then we know we've hit a contact once there becomes a problem that a resident asks us to intervene with. Thank you.
Justin, do you want to have first go at that one, and then we can go back to Adrian if there's anything to add?
I can answer it in general terms, in that ideally I think it's more in regards to communication, just make sure that there are central channels that are available. So certainly in terms of communications, for example, we can put forward, happy to have a conversation outside of this meeting, but just to make sure that you have got direct contacts to ensure that actually the things like this, and it may be a total different matter than garages, but just to make sure that you have a central contract and that you're speaking to the right people and that progress can be made.
Thank you. Adrian, anything you wanted to add to that? You don't have to.
Sorry, I was just scribbling down. On the point of garages, again, I will need to look at if I can have the specific details of where we're talking. I can get the right person, because you appreciate we cover the whole of the east of England, so I just need to understand exactly where and which team it will be for that, and we can make contact. In terms of a single point of contact, as I say, I think it would be really helpful if I get the email out to you on the learning and resolution team. That's where all of our MP inquiries go, so that we can track them where you need to raise formally a matter, and what will be coming out is more local connections where you simply want to have a chat. But I would appreciate it going through the learning and resolution.
Great, thank you. Fabian, is there anything you want to add before I move on?
Yeah, if I can just contact, I'll forward to Teresa my ward, because just touching on the garage point, which is quite minor compared to everyone else's problems, but I'm just responding to my residents' points. Perhaps if you have got some vacant, and like I say, for my ward particularly, and everyone else's, even to let someone know, so it could just be a note in the local parish magazine that there is garages available and applicants are welcome, because it's no good to you sitting there being empty, as much good as it is to me. So it'd just be a quick resolve, and I don't know how many you've actually got vacant or need sorting out, but it's a useful asset in villages which I'd like to see fully utilised. Thank you.
Thanks, Fabian. Philip, I think you're next.
Thank you, Chairman. I just wanted to ask Jason and Adrian really around the energy efficiency of housing. As a country, we're committed to being zero carbon by 2050. Can we do anything more to improve the energy performance certificates, and how quickly can we do that improvement? And is there anything we as Breckland can help them with?
I'll go Adrian, then Justin this time to change things up.
Okay, thank you very much. An enormous question for us all to challenge. At our last strategy event with all board members and the executive, it was a point of conversation really. What are our challenges going forward? If we look at our stock is getting older all the time, and the standards in it are very small. Estimates are sort of 500 million to bring everything up to a zero carbon standard. Now that is a ridiculous amount of money in one way, but somehow we have to rise to that challenge. Of course, we're building better quality homes. It's going to be the challenge of what we do with older stock. We certainly are looking at the energy efficiency side, as I mentioned in my presentation, but it is going to be something we want to be talking to all local authorities about, as what are some of the approaches we can take. We may even into the future, and I don't say this is a short term, but into the future we have to make tough decisions about what stock should be retained and what stock can we just simply not get to a good enough standard. And we will want to have programs over many years of converting homes. I don't think everything will be possible to retrofit. We don't have any answers at the moment. It is a big challenge for us as a group about what is our response to the zero carbon agenda. And that's one of our topics for this year.
Thanks, Adrian. Justin, anything to add?
Yeah, I would just say in terms of advice, I kind of break it down into 3 areas. So you have the property element. So we look at the buildings, and certainly registered social landlords and landlords will be determined to have a plan in place to improve their buildings, as Adrian was saying, on a 30-year plan. Some buildings will be more challenging to do that than others for obvious reasons. But outside of that, and in regards to the advice, the other areas that we need to look at is your usage. So it's understanding your usage or your consumption in the home, because that also has a big impact. Depending on how you use your electricity, how you use your heating system, it's really important to get the right advice out there to people. It was not only a few days ago that I was listening to an article by Martin Lewis, the money saving expert, and he was providing advice along the lines of, you should have your heating system on a timer at 2 times a day. Don't put it on a background heating setting for a long period of time. And I just think you really have to be careful nowadays in regards to the advice you're given, because it will be dependent on the type of heating system you have in your home, and heating systems do act differently, and there are also challenges with mold and condensation in the home. So it's really important to make sure you're talking to the right people, speak to the landlords if needs be, to get a better understanding about that, just to make sure that clear and accurate advice is being provided. And the third bit of advice I would encourage is in regards to your energy provider, because what we have found is that depending on who your energy provider is, there is certainly some really good benefits to changing your energy provider. And for some people, they don't like to do that, but they don't necessarily also know the benefits, the financial benefits of changing providers. So it's something that I would actively encourage in regards to any conversations you have. Three key themes. One is the building. Speak to your landlord if needs be in terms of what plans they have for improving efficiencies. Usage, understand the usage, and there are comparison sites also that you can use to understand how your average usage for your gas or electric compares against others, and then also looking at the comparison of the different rates from different utility providers.
Thank you, Justin. One slight follow-up on this question that I had, and then I'll ask Philip if he has any further comments, is, so from the 1st of April, I think all housing that's being rented out needs to be an EPC level of an E or higher. Are there any stock in either of your organisations which are lower than an E currently, or have you already done that assessment and everything's above?
If I can, I don't have the absolute details, but we've had a program for a number of years now where we have been either bringing them up to that standard. So there's certainly let in that standard if we ever get any voids, and we are selling any properties where we cannot bring them up to that standard, or we're aware they're below that standard.
Thanks, Justin.
Yes, I don't have the exact number to hand. I do believe we do have some E-rated properties. That is the absolute exception. It's less than a dozen, and they will relate to properties that actually we aren't able to carry out the measures required to bring them up to a higher standard. So they're kind of exempt from that legislation, and the reason will be is they're likely to be buildings of historical importance or listed buildings whereby you are very restricted in regards to the level of works that you can actually carry out. And again, as Adrian was saying earlier, is kind of having a strategy to understand what we are going to do with those properties moving forward.
Great, thank you. Philip, did you have anything else you wanted to add?
Yeah, just really that my concern is that 2050 sounds a long way off. I just want to make sure that, you know, people are focused on having a target. Maybe it's an annual or 5-year figure where we're tackling some of the worst performing houses. And I'll be interested to see how that develops. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Gordon, I have you next.
Okay, thank you. My question really is to Adrian, and it's concerning Japanese knotweed on your properties in Hockering. Now, you have had this question for some time. Several weeks ago I put it in, and I'm sure the officers passed it to you, so I hope you've got an answer for me. I particularly liked your comments, points of exciting change and planned maintenance. And I'm hoping you can tell me when your planned maintenance is going to get rid of the knotweed in Hockering. I know we were told not to expect specific answers to ward matters, but because you've had the question so long, I hope you've got it. You were told about it in March, April. You have since, as an by you, I mean the organisation, you've since been told about it several times by several people who I can name within the village in my ward. And really, it's a big concern because Japanese knotweed is a national problem when it occurs.
Okay, and Gordon, do you know which association is specifically in charge of that?
As I said, it was Adrian. It's Flagship Housing.
Okay, Adrian.
Yep. I do have a very brief answer. Yeah, we have it. We have asked a specialist contractor to visit a site and make recommendations for its removal.
Can I have a follow-up then?
Yes, go ahead.
What can we do when we get additional reports. I mean, where the knotweed is, it's adjacent to a river that actually flows from there about half an hour later through my garden, about half a mile later, I should say, through my garden. It then comes into the Tud. What can we do about the spread of this plant, which your organisation have known about since at least April and possibly before then, because it is now shedding seed. The seed are getting into the river, they are drifting down. If I got knotweed, will you come and remove mine as well? I mean, this is a question, these are questions that I'm being asked in my ward, because there is a feeling that Flagship are letting the whole village of Hockering down, and not just their individual tenants in their individual houses.
Thank you, Gordon. Adrian, do you have anything further to add?
I can't really add. We have specialists going to be looking at it to remove it. I don't know where it came from, so I think we've got the same challenge of, did it come from somebody else's property? So I think we'd not get into whose fault is it. What we need to do is get rid of it.
And can you tell me when?
Not in this meeting, but I can get a follow-up.
So you'll email me later today, will you?
I'll certainly get you an update as quickly as I can.
Thank you, Gordon. I think that's covered off that issue.
I won't press any further.
David Wickerson.
Thank you, Chair. This is a very general question. I mean, in a lot of these circumstances, not just in the housing situation, but the key to efficiency is communication. So this is a question for Adrian, really, because, correct me if I'm wrong, we don't have any Broadland properties in my ward, which is Swaffham, but we do obviously have a lot of Flagship properties in and around Swaffham. Communication, Adrian, correct me if I'm wrong, you mentioned that despite the fact that you provide phone numbers to the residents, etc., as ward members, we quite often get direct calls to us because they have a problem. But you mentioned that you have a, correct me if I'm wrong, a learning and resolution centre to which you would suggest or recommend all calls are made in the first instance. Is that correct?
No, that's not for public use. It's for people that have a complaint. It's where we focus particular from MPs, any formal complaints, and I think it would be very sensible for councillors to use that. I wouldn't want it issued to others because they simply won't be able to handle the levels. The best contact is through our contact centre response teams, through the main switchboard numbers, not the repairs numbers, but through the main switchboard.
Right. So if we were contacted by a tenant here in Swaffham who had an issue, when you send out your list of properties for each councillor, which would be very, very helpful, I have to say, is there a local number for immediate response, or should all the issues be directed centrally?
What I need to stress, if I may, is where we are now. It is not an ideal position, as we've talked about, really. Where we are moving to, and that is within a matter of months, is we will be issuing you with details of who the local teams are, right, and the best contact there. And what that will do is give you, what we're effectively having is local hubs, so that there will be 8 people that will be responsible for everything in that area. And no matter if they're on leave, not there, whatever, they will get that inquiry and they will deal with it, and we'll be measuring that people do respond to those inquiries. That system isn't yet in place because we're needing to move people around and put everything in place to enable that to happen. But in the meantime, if you could continue using the methods you do, and we will inform you about the next step to improve that.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you. Terry, I think you're next.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, I've got a couple of points, try and be brief. The first one is around sort of rent statements, and I think it was Adrian's slide that showed a sort of potential digital solution to making tenants aware of their balance. It's been a frustration of mine because in lots of cases where I've dealt with tenants that are in rent arrears, often they didn't know they were in rent arrears, and it kept building and building, and became more of a problem than if they were to receive regular updates. So I don't know if it's still the case with both Flagship and Broadland, but it used to be that tenants weren't regularly informed what the balance was on their account. And I sort of liken the fact that, with my bank, I get monthly statements, whether I like it or not, but tenants don't get that as frequently. With that digital solution, the slide that was shown there, that kind of gave me the impression that actually there could be some sort of app and they could log on when they want to see what their balance is. So hopefully that is the case, but I'd be keen to hear from you both about how you are empowering your tenants to responsibly manage their account, because that seemed to be severely lacking in the past. You mentioned about a stock list for councillors, which is long overdue. Could that include all assets? I have a constant issue as a councillor of trying to work out who owns what piece of land, who owns what garage block, and it drives me mad, frankly. But obviously Flagship own housing, but in my area they own lots of pieces of land, they own lots of garage blocks as well. It would help me and others significantly if it was clearer as to who owned what, and that could help with that. And then similarly, I've sufficiently tunnelled my way in Thetford to the Flagship team, so I do know who the people are that I need to go to on a regular basis. I'm a persistent contact, shall we say. But that has been severely lacking over the years for all councillors. More so Flagship, obviously, with me being based in Thetford, but there was always resistance to councillors having appointed or go-to people for specific problems. But I sense, Adrian, with the local hubs method that you're talking about, that may be changing, which I think is very welcome. I wonder, Chairman, if that's one of the actions that we can take from this discussion for us to review the implementation of local hubs and contacts for councillors, because it's been a recurring frustration of councillors. Who do you go to? I'm sufficiently long enough a councillor that I used to know the nominated person for my ward, and that was 12 years ago, and I've not known the person for the last 11 years or something like that. So it would be a really useful action, I think, for us to review local hubs and to enable councillors to help Flagship, not just go to them with problems all the time. But that's absolutely key in my book. So a couple of points there, Joe.
Thanks, Terry. Adrian, another one for you then.
I actually think Julian may want to comment on the portal. So I believe they're a little bit more advanced than us in that regard, what their customers can do. We are working on, we did have a portal, then we withdrew it because it wasn't satisfactory. We are working very hard on getting a portal that enables exactly what you say. Really, this day and age, our customers should be able to access the status of their account and many other things online, and we're working very hard to get something in place that gives them that. Again, it's something we're striving for as a very hard push as managing directors to say we've got to have this for our people. In terms of all of the ownership of land, etc., that sounds like a bit of a pickle to try and work out, but just because of the logistics of exactly how do we show you what's owned and what isn't shown, and so on. But I'm sure if we have local councillors like Councillor Ajemi that are very interested, we could arrange something more specific to just have a look and say, do we own it or don't we own it, and just probably over the screen be able to go, tell us where it is and we'll have a look.
So just on that second point, Adrian, and I guess this is also for Broadland as well, do you not have a register of all of your property, a sort of property schedule? Maybe it doesn't need to produce graphically for Terry and other councillors, but even if you said in Thetford, these are the addresses of all of the properties that we own, that might be half the battle.
Sorry, I misled you there. We do have that, and we will provide that in terms of properties. The councillor was asking about land ownership and the like, and that obviously is a bit more of a challenge to show. But with all of our ownership, properties, land, everything is digitally recorded, so we can sit and look at a particular area, and we can create a map of it if we need to. Which is, I wouldn't want to commit to do that across the entire region, because that would be a massive piece of work for us.
Yeah, you'd only need to do it for Breckland, so it'd be fine.
As long as you don't tell anybody else.
Yeah, quite. You can rely on us. It's not a public meeting. Justin, did you want to add anything on the portal? Adrian mentioned that Broadland are slightly more advanced on the portal front.
Just to say that we do have a web portal which is called Tenants Online for all of our tenants to register accounts. Tenants can look at their balance, view their balance, they can pay their rent or report repairs, and it's an area which is continuously being developed to add more information. We want to develop it further to include certificates. So for example, when you have your gas service completed or an electrical safety check, that all of this information is accessible in a digital format under your own account.
Great, thank you. Terry, anything you want to come back on? Were you good?
No, that all sounds good to me, Chairman.
Thank you. In which case, Linda, then Peter, then Hilary I have. So Linda, go next.
Thank you, Chairman. I've got a couple of things. In addition to my patch, which is mainly flagship, so I will be addressing flagship rather than Broadland, but I also have the hat of the Older People's Champion for Breckland on my shoulders, so this is something very dear to my heart. And I've been involved with working with flagship in the past. We've done a visit to Michael Chaplin House, spent a day with you in the past, learnt how things tick, which has been very useful, except we can't do that at the moment. One of the biggest issues I find is in breach of tenancy agreements. So often people are in housing association accommodation for very sensitive reasons. It could be domestic abuse, it could be disability or whatever. And it's very often hard to explain to their neighbours why something is going on, where we know what's going on and why they need to be protected and everything. But certainly in my patch, it took 18 months to get a completely disruptive couple moved. If they had been in private rented accommodation, they would have been served with a section 31 or whatever it is and given 3 months go. So what I want is some assurance moving forward that all the housing associations, not just your two, which are the main ones, but Orbit, Saffron, Hasto, all of them, can assure councillors how the tenancies are monitored and managed in the times of apparent breach. In addition to that, since I've been using the Learning and Resolution team, it's been great. And I must give you, it's very easy to criticise other people, but let's have a compliment where it is there. So I encourage my fellow councillors to use that system. The issue of sheltered housing, you obviously haven't read the Shipdham appraisal because there is a demand for sheltered housing there. So again, councillors can help you with the local need for the areas that they know. And finally, from me, this is a request to Alison and the housing team really. So as up-to-date information comes in from any of the housing associations about contact numbers, etc., could that be put on the Breckland members website? Then we have an up-to-date information bank, including with these maps of where the properties are, all the housing association properties. I know in my patch I've got quite a few Saffron ones being built, etc. And the more information councillors have, the more reassurance we can give our residents, but also we can support all you housing association guys out there, because we all need to work together. So that's my little bleat. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Linda. Adrian, do you have any comments on any of that?
I thank you for the feedback. In terms of antisocial behaviour, I mean, it is an incredibly difficult issue. We offer the highest security of tenure we can when people move in, and it isn't a straightforward process if somebody chooses to breach that. Our ambition is always to rectify behaviour, then evict. That's our first starting point, and I think you would agree that that should be our position. And it is the courts that will ultimately decide whether or not we can evict, and the burden of proof is very high nowadays. But we do have specialist teams that do that, and actually what we've been looking at as part of these hubs, because there is a different way of working across the group, we will be introducing a slightly larger antisocial behaviour team of specialists so that they can help. But we also have a lot of tenancy support expertise who come alongside that, so that it isn't just about enforcement, it is about trying to rectify the position. Otherwise we just find them moving into another property and doing the same somewhere else.
Thanks, Adrian. And at risk of having had your thunder stolen, Justin, was there anything further you wanted to add on antisocial behaviour? You're on mute. There.
Yes, so I just to summarise and echo some of what Adrian said, really is sometimes it's really important in terms of who we put into those homes in the first instance. We are restricted and we do have guidelines to follow, but sometimes it's important that if there's a sensitive let for whatever reason, that can be taken into consideration. We do have tenancy support teams. We work with multiple agencies including specialist legal teams and local enforcement agencies. We also have access to something which is called a noise app to help assist in that process, so that tenants can actually record information that helps in the process if a court is to proceed to legal proceedings. So it's something that ultimately, in terms of building communities, we want to keep on top of. It is a difficult subject, but something that we work with multiple agencies on and have dedicated team members, local team members working on as a preventative measure.
Thank you very much. In which case I will go on to Peter Wilkinson.
So, sorry, Leader,
sorry,
Chairman, could I just come back for a second?
Yes, go ahead.
To both our gentlemen present. I hear what you say, but again, this comes down to communication. So if there's an issue going on with a property in, let's just say, Durham, for example, the councillor just needs to know, without breaching any confidentiality, what action is happening, so that we can go back to our resident and say, this has been logged, this is being dealt with by an antisocial behaviour officer or whatever it is. Because the worst bit of communication is no communication. And I hate going back to residents saying, oh, it's really sorry, I'll chase it up again. And it seems that it's always the councillors doing the chasing, when some simple information being kept in the loop within GDPR and all the rest of it would help us do our job better and give that reassurance to the resident. Thank you, Chairman.
I think that is heard loud and clear, thank you. So I've got Peter Wilkinson, then Hilary, then Robert. And I haven't got any other indications presently. So Peter, Teresa, who else did you see?
Sorry, Chairman, Councillor Webb would like to.
And Alison and Ian. Oh, it's a real fest here. Okay, fine. Okay, so Peter, you go next.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, Linda and Terry's taken my thunder a little bit, but I do endorse what Terry said and Linda, and I'm reassured by Adrian Barber's response that those actions will be acted upon straight away, because we've all got the past issues. We have officers contact. What contact we've had with officers have mainly been the people that sign over the houses to the tenants when they've been identified by the housing team. And if you ask them anything other than what they do, I don't know what their job is apart from signing houses over, but they seem to implode, and that's caused me personally a lot of problems over the last 2 or 3 years, as we had 30 new social houses built in one of my villages. So I'd like to make sure those things Adrian's mentioned that comes forward. So we have got the and what the thing that Councillor Eagle asked for as well. So please make sure those are endorsed to us. And could we have the? Is it going to be possible to have the questions answered individually? We've had which we submitted beforehand. Obviously, you're not going to be able to answer in every one this morning. Excuse me, this morning. But could we have a possible answer to our individual questions? And a helpful point here for, I think Councillor Martin brought it up, the backing up of sewers. Now, I've had several issues of that over the years in flagship properties, and I've gone straight to the water board because they told me they are the ones responsible, not an individual owner or a tenant, and they've always obliged and sorted out the backing up of the sewers in reasonable states where they're not new, they're elderly states, they're what's built in the 70s, 60s, 70s. So that's just a point. You can follow up if that's correct, and then councillors will know where to go with any issues with sewers backing up. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter, for all of those. Unless Justin or Adrian vigorously nod otherwise, I guess you've already covered all of those points, in which case I will move on to the next contribution. So that is Hilary. Go ahead, Hilary.
Thank you, Chairman. To both associations, bearing in mind that some of your residents are older and have problems such as Alzheimer's, this is a cause for a major problem with communication. Maybe they do not use digital means. There are different telephone numbers for different services. How can you make this an easier experience for them? The second part is communication. This is mainly for flagship. Communication with repairs. Residents left without any knowledge and are often left with repairs not completed and no communication as to when these projects will be completed. One particular person I'm dealing with, the major problem was that the resident was blind. So there was pieces all over the floor, everything else, not a good scenario. My third point, which is for both organisations, how often do the organisations check their properties? Because I think if people thought that you cared, they would then care about their properties. Thank you.
Thank you, Hilary. So I'll go to Justin first, and if you could answer the question around dementia awareness in terms of your organisation and any other steps you take for people with particular deficiencies, and also what you do in terms of property visits. Do you have a regular rota of property visits, and how do you make sure that the standards are maintained where possible?
Okay, so for a lot of our sheltered schemes or homes for people of older age, we do have full-time scheme managers in our sheltered schemes, which means that we have an on-site presence there all of the time who understand people's needs. We also have housing with care schemes, which are managed 24/7 by a managing care provider. I mentioned channel shift previously. So what that would mean is that the people who do have access to digital means, if we transfer those people from that platform, it then frees up additional time to focus on our tenants who don't have a digital means, and we can contact these people, have a lot more regular contact with them because it frees up resource. I mean, a good example of that is when we went into lockdown. For example, we made sure that we wrote to all of our tenants, and we had all of our tenants who were of older age or had challenge or difficulties. We had an active part in phoning at those tenants to make sure that they were okay on a regular basis, and assisting other agencies with delivering foods and helping out in other areas outside of our normal service delivery. In regards to how often we check our properties, I alluded to in my presentation that because we are in and out of homes on a regular basis, for all of our staff, they are trained in regards to safeguarding, making sure that the house, if they see anything that they're concerned about in regards to the condition of the home, we have processes that is reported back. But on top of that, we actually our asset team survey the properties on a 5-year cycle. So that's a more rigid process in regards to collecting a lot of information, what we call a stock condition survey. That's carried out on a 5-year cycle. And then we also annually have an external agency, an outsourced contractor or consultancy firm providing independent information in regards to the condition of a sample of our homes.
Thank you. And Adrian, those 2 points, and then the specific point raised by Hilary as well, please.
Very much same as has just been mentioned. What I would say is part of the learning through the COVID period has been that proactive contact and understanding who our most vulnerable clients are. We don't want to call it that. It's a bit of a difficult term, calling people vulnerable, because people don't want to be called vulnerable. So it is who are our residents who would benefit from that proactive contact, and that is something we've started to look at. How do we do that? Part of our response, as mentioned, we learned a lot. We phoned 6,900 residents through COVID, actually making contact. Not many of them actually wanted us to be in contact, which was interesting, but certainly they were grateful of it. But the hub teams, one of the specialisms that we will have in that service is for people with higher needs, so that we are proactively identifying them. And it's a piece of work I mentioned in my presentation about understanding who lives in our homes far better than we do now. There was a period of time in the not distant past where we were encouraged not to hold too much information about people because people didn't like it. I think we're entering an age again where people are, well, everybody knows everything about me. As long as you're using it for the benefit of the service, we would be happy to give you that. So there is a piece of work that's going to go on over the next 2 years, increasingly getting more and more data so that we know who needs most support, and we do that proactively. We also have to use that digital agenda, as was mentioned, to release time. We have got to get more people self-serving, so that we can have people available to do the one-to-one work that's so important. Inspections, exactly the same as Julian, really. We do that we do have to be careful that we don't try and put our standards onto those people, and it's only if they are breaching their tenancy in terms of conditions. The ultimate judgment is will a judge give an order for that person to be removed from their home as a consequence, and that is a very draconian step for most circumstances. So we would want to resolve it, and that's where we need to put our energy. We don't want to get people out of their homes, we want to resolve the matter. And we do have specialists that deal with hoarding, for example, and we're seeing a large increase in hoarding cases. So mental health is clearly a big challenge going forward, and we are looking at how do we respond to that. We have a team specifically looking at what is a mental health challenge and what's the role of our association in helping to address that in partnership. I think did I miss something?
Hilary, did that cover everything you asked?
The only thing was about the repairs side of it, when it's left, which is basically for Adrian, when a project is left and the tenant has no idea when they're going back. And the most serious one was, on one instance, was a blind resident. And the shower was removed, everything was left in the way. Not very helpful for someone who's blind, but no communication. And eventually I had to get involved after 15 weeks.
Yeah, that isn't good, is it? I don't know the circumstances. I would hope that the place we're going to, where they will have specialist contacts, that if those situations occur, and I would rather they didn't occur in the first place, but if they do occur, that you will have people to contact who are local that will deal with that issue. We do know that, you know, the repairs is a challenge, and the communications, and unfortunately COVID has not made that situation any better. It's not an excuse, it's just not made it any better, because we've now got a big backlog to try and catch up with. So all I can say to you, I think, to reassure you, is the direction we're going in is to be far better at communicating with you and embracing that relationship and giving you more information, so that if things do go wrong, we can talk to each other. I must say, we do need to encourage residents to keep telling us where things are not going right. It's really important they do tell us, because we have to make changes if we're not getting it right, and we will only make them if people keep telling us.
Okay, thank you, Adrian. Robert, you're next.
Thank you, Chairman. Question really about maintenance. I note that Broadland have their maintenance team in the house. I think Flagship use RFT. I'm not sure that's across the entire organisation, but certainly locally. So my questions are, what are the performance targets under the contract or service level agreement that exists? How are they monitored? And what remedies are available to Flagship for failure to achieve targets?
Sorry, was that for Broadland or for Flagship, or for both there, right, Robert? You're on mute.
It was for Flagship.
Okay, so Adrian, one for you then.
Okay, I feel I'm getting an unfair amount of time compared to poor Julian. I'm sure he's desperate to be talking, but no, I mean, we do Flagship RFT is our in-house provider. We also have a contractor for the Suffolk homes for when that came across, but that will be moving potentially to RFT. Timescales are to be agreed, and of course we need to let people know that, but it won't be until the new, at least next year. And we do in North Norfolk have a separate contractor, but again, I expect that will ultimately move into RFT. So it's all provided in-house. We have a suite of performance information, and one of the moves we talked about is having local boards, and those local boards do receive performance information, and they do have the managing director of those repair services come along to explain performance and what they are doing if the performance isn't up to standard.
Thank you.
Anything further, Robert?
No, that I didn't appreciate that RFT was effectively in-house, although I believe it's a separate legal entity. Is that correct?
It is a part of the Flagship group. It's a wholly owned part of Flagship group.
Okay. And sorry, just on your point about local boards, Adrian, how did you determine how local a local board needs to be an effective part of your bureaucracy?
That's a really good question. What we have at the moment is the current Victory board, which is made up of 5 residents and 5 others, is largely drawn from North Norfolk. But of course we are going to be taking on, and that's my current area, but we are going to be taking on the whole of Norfolk, including Breckland. So we will be looking at how do we ensure that's representative across the whole area, which will bring challenges in terms of geography. But I think in terms of technology, it's shown that there are answers to it if we put our minds to it. But it is for residents to be able to nominate people to that board if we have vacancies. We are also undertaking a review in the coming months to ensure that those local boards, they may not be called local boards going forward, but the local boards are well connected with the strategic board of Flagship Group, so that performance is measured and challenged and gets fed up through the organisation.
Okay, thank you. Alison, I think you're next.
Thank you, Chairman. Right, okay. On a positive note, the housing team have told me that they work well with both Flagship and with Broadland housing teams, so that the relationship has been good. However, since COVID started, it's been a little bit stressed because of the amount of time things are taking to get jobs done. Now, I think it's been reflected very well today, the amount of work and frustration with councillors who are having residents phone them up and say, look, this has been waiting 10 weeks. We haven't got communication from anybody to say when it's going to be finished. We have incidents of unsafe properties with individuals in who had to wait, well, it's 21 days now, and we still haven't had anybody out. It's things like that which really worry me. Now, I know COVID was a very difficult time and the lockdown was difficult, and I know we've got issues with catching up with the backlog, but there must be a time when it's recognised that issues like this need to be taken forward as a matter of urgency. Both housing organisations need to prioritise somehow this work and try and catch up on the backlog, because God forbid what's going to happen in the future, and this can't keep happening to our residents. This is how I feel at the moment. I'm hopeful that the actual changes that Flagship are bringing in are going to lead to a more personal approach rather than one big organisation. This is the hope for the future. I would like to know at times, I'm one for deadlines and times and targets of when this is actually going to be achieved. Councillor Turner's suggestion, of course we will put everything that we can to help members onto the members page, because that helps us, because then we're not getting all the questions coming into the housing team. So we need to work together. The last point I'd like to make is the key to all this with our residents is early intervention. Early intervention when they've got arrears of mortgages, or sorry, arrears of their rents, or they've got any other issues. And I think listening, there is a little bit of this going on, but I think there's still more work to be done on early intervention so that we get to the situation so we're not getting to the crisis point for individuals. That's what we need to be avoiding. So, but thank you. I'd like to thank both gentlemen for presenting today. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much, Alison. And that's not to let the gentleman think that we're at the end yet, because we're not. But but it was nice nonetheless. I do still have Ian. I also have a few small questions to ask. And if Ian is happy, I will ask them before him, because he's already had his first stab. That's not, again, really a choice of Ian's. Sorry, Ian. And this is to both organisations. So, and my knowledge around housing associations isn't extremely strong. So I hope that you'll forgive me if they're obvious. But firstly, you referenced rent arrears, and they were roughly around 3.5%, I think, in the Broadland presentation. I don't think Adrian covered it, because obviously it had just been covered by Broadland, understandably, but presumably roughly the same percentages historically. I wondered if you'd seen an increase in rent arrears during the pandemic, as has been seen in the private sector. So that's question one. Question two is, and again, the Broadland presentation showed there'd been a significant drop in the number of evictions that had taken place in the last full year. I want to ask, what actually happens, and this is potentially a question for the housing team as well, if someone is evicted from a housing association property, where do they then end up? Because that wasn't, I think it's sometimes a place that you are put in the first place. So are you making them homeless, or how do we deal with that as a council, or with the housing associations? That's my second question. The third question is in relation to the optimal size of a housing association. So my understanding is that housing associations are generally companies limited by guarantee. You're not for profit. Everything that's earned is poured back into that organisation. And over the last few years, we've seen an increase in consolidation in terms of the size of housing associations. So they have grown. Is is the dream that we have one huge association for the whole of the country, or is there a size that you're targeting? And do you think that economies of scale are borne out, or do you think equally, given the local board's point, that being too big has meant it's been more difficult to focus on specific issues in localities? So I just wanted both of your views on that and whether or not either association had more plans to grow or shrink, and so on. And then the last point is on housing repairs. So I've heard from a lot of members now that there have been various issues where repairs have been delayed. Some serious repairs have been delayed unacceptably. And obviously in some instances, particular residents have vulnerabilities that have meant that we might have taken special action if we looked back at the case now. And I refer to Hillary's example of the individual who had a sight impairment and was left with stuff around. Do the associations currently run a programme of compensation for residents where delays in maintenance are experienced? I guess the basis of that being that you would have a reasonable expectation of your property being habitable and fit for purpose and so on. So is that something housing associations have? I'm assuming the answer is no. And if the answer is no, is that something that you would consider introducing? A bit like when flights are delayed, there's an automatic compensation for you if your flight is delayed, and maybe if you're a resident of a housing association, to reflect that they recognise they have standards to meet in terms of their timings in repairs. If your repair takes more than X number of days, then you automatically get a third off the next month's rent or something like that. So I'll start with Justin, seeing as he's had less of the flag so far, and then I'll go to Adrian.
Okay, so to start off, the question in regards to rent arrears in the COVID-19 period, I don't have the actual figures with me to hand. There has been an increase in arrears due to COVID-19 or during the period of the COVID-19, which we have seen. Surprisingly, it hasn't been as big as we would have expected. And we do believe that the furlough scheme has probably contributed to that so far. So there's still a level of risk that we need to be concerned about as the furlough period ended and is replaced with the government's new scheme. So it's still on our radar. It's still a real concern. They certainly haven't reduced, but I can't answer it in specific terms. But it hasn't increased as much as we would have expected it to date. In regards to evictions, the eviction question, so I mean, my concern is, and this is part of the reason why we try to prevent people from being evicted, unless there is absolutely a very good reason or a certain grounds that we won't evict, is otherwise what do happen to these people? Otherwise, do they just get recycled in the system and it's just somebody else's other problem? So it's really important that we have a joined up approach as opposed to thinking of it in a small-minded way, which I would consider it a small-minded way. It's just getting rid of a problem, which is actually not actually addressing the issue. In regards to the question in regards to organisations and mergers and so forth, and is there a one-size-fits-all? That is a real difficult question. So you would expect in regards to economies of scale that the bigger you are, that the more that you're able to deliver and the more efficient you are as an organisation. I certainly think from Broadland's perspective, there are no immediate plans to grow and merge with other organisations. And one of the foundations of the organisation is to be able to provide local and friendly services. So it's something that I certainly hope that we can maintain to do for the foreseeable future. In regards to repairs and compensation, I think it's important to say, and this picks up an earlier point that was mentioned by Councillor Allison. When we went into the lockdown, we did a consultation exercise and included all of our residents and talked to all of our residents about how we would get back on track and what the plans would be in regards to that backlog of repairs. Now, throughout all of the period of time, as I'm sure would be the same with Flagship, is that any emergency repairs or urgent repairs were carried out regardless. We just need to make sure that we had the appropriate risk assessments in place to make sure that those works could be carried out safely. So that has continued regardless. What we did do is then look at all of the various different faults that we have in our homes, and then set out expectations in terms of the timescales for those repairs to be completed. So there are repairs, so for example, replacing of skirting, that actually we would have put that in a longer period timescale to be completed, say 6 months or longer, but it's about managing those expectations and communicating and hoping that by the end of the financial year, and this is a real difficult call to make because we don't know what's going to happen with infection rates increasing, whether things will go backwards or not. We've been able to make significant progress in regards of using our planned maintenance team to help and clear the backlog of the repairs, but it's really difficult to say precisely because of the external influences when we will actually get back on track, but we would like to think we'll be back on track by the end of March, providing that nothing consequential happens in the meantime. In regards to compensation, that's very topical at the moment because I know a paper has just gone to our leadership team in regards to the cost or the offer of a £10 compensation fee every time that we have to cancel an appointment. Outside of that, for bigger measures of compensation, they tend to be dealt with on a case-by-case basis. So it will go through our complaints process, and there are different financial limits that are set depending on the financial compensation that can be awarded. But it depends on the individual case, and they are all different.
And sorry, just on that last point before I go to Adrian, so those limits you refer to, those are internally set, they're not from regulation or statute or guidance?
No, they're not. They are internal measures, internal compensation
All right,
limits.
thank you. Adrian, are there any, I appreciate you've had the benefit of Justin's answers first, so feel free to skip bits that you don't want to repeat. But
no, there's some important information. I think in terms of arrears levels for us, we're running at about £1 million more in terms of arrears. We do think we'll recover some of that by the end of the year. We've also introduced an initiative, you may have seen it in the press, of Hopestead, which is very much aimed to relieve the pressure on people that have found arrears through no fault of their own during the COVID period. And that has so far helped 615 families, and we've written off £355,000 worth of arrears to help those families so that that pressure is relieved. We try not to evict, as Julian said. It's not the way we want to go. I do think there's a big piece of work, and we've already started talking about it with colleagues at Breckland. Is the challenge going forward is we are seeing increasingly complex cases moving into our homes. And none of us can do it on our own. We have to find solutions that mean we can house the most difficult cases, the highest demand cases, and together put a package around them before they ever move into a home. And we have got to find a solution to that. And we're very keen to look at that, partly through us saying we can provide this support, picking up the Councillor Webb's point. We have to do this together, and we have to be open about it, and we have to share the risk. And the only way we're going to do that is to have early intervention and manage it, be upfront about this is what we're managing and how we're going to manage it. And I'm very excited. We're having those conversations. We haven't reached conclusions, but we're up for it. We've got to find ways to house these people. They cannot sit in TA. It costs you a fortune, and it's absolutely no good for those families. So sorry, it's a bit of a passion of mine. The optimal size for RPs, well, Flagship, you can see, has grown. We have said, look, we are not constantly seeking to grow. We do believe there is a value in becoming a little bit bigger. Perhaps up to 50,000 homes. But as you've heard, the importance for us is we must retain local connections. We do not want to just become big and then lose that local connection. So that's why we're keeping local organisations with a local board, so that there is, and my responsibility will be, my connection will be directly with Breckland. It is my job to talk to all of you and make sure we're delivering the services. It sounds like I've got work to do, but I'm looking forward to it. Optimal size, in my experience, 30 odd years, it used to be about 5,000 homes was a really good size. I think it's moved probably to 10 to 15,000 in terms of having that connectivity and knowing your customers well enough. In terms of locality, I think in terms of efficiency, they can be a lot bigger in terms of ability to procure and so on and so forth. But I mean, of course, we'd always welcome having a chat with Broadland, but that's naughty. I shouldn't do that. Right to repair, there is a right to repair. There is a statutory right to repair. If we fail to maintain properties to a standard, they have, residents have a right to advise us that if we do not carry out that repair within a specified time, they will have the repair done and recharge us for it. So that is a statutory function. We would never want to get to that point because it means we have absolutely failed to deliver. I have heard of schemes such as the one Julian mentioned. I don't know whether Flagship has done that in the past. I say I only joined in February, but I have seen it work elsewhere, but it only is about £10 from missed appointment. And I think for me, I'd rather we got the blooming thing right in the first place than just give people money because we didn't turn up. But yeah, sorry, I think that's it. A quick whistle stop.
No, that's really helpful. Thank you. So I still have Ian, and I don't see anyone else. So Ian, if you go, and if anyone else wants to indicate them, please do.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just 3 quick points. Certainly would welcome the stock list. That would be very helpful. In Flagship, the indication of going forward, Breckland appears to be, you indicated Breckland is likely to be split within the Flagship organisation. That raise concerns that there is a consistency across the district. That's probably as much as one can say at this point, but just concerned that that is a significant split. And lastly, really to both gentlemen, we're in the midst of planning consultations at the moment. One that's just closed, one's about to. The one that's just closed included the First Homes initiative. Do either of our housing associations have a view on how that might affect them and possibly the ability to deliver shared ownership? Thank you.
Thank you, Ian. I'll go to Justin first, then Adrian.
No, apologies. My knowledge in regards to the First Homes in terms of development, I can't really answer or say much on that at this stage of praise. I'm happy to get back to you with information, but I don't have any information firsthand to add to that. Sorry.
No problem. Thank you. And Adrian.
Yes, thank you. Yes, certainly the stock list, we will get that out. The consistency side, we have 3 managing directors. We work very closely together. And one of our ambitions, the reason we aren't simply going live now is we are making sure that we can go live and not have a postcode lottery. We must ensure that whether they are managed by my team or one or the other, the residents will get the same service. So they will get the same repairs service, they will get the same home service and so on. What we do want locally is the ability to be flexible to local demands. So I think that's about flexibility within boroughs as well as across boroughs. I will be the lead for Breckland, whatever. So you will only have me in hopefully good and bad to deal with, and I will represent the whole of Flagship in terms of the housing service. Of course, other experts will come in that you're talking to about regeneration, such as the Abbey Estate. The other fine, the shared ownership ramifications, yeah, we had a briefing note come out last week, I think it was the week before, about what that might mean. It's interesting that the repairs obligations is potentially going to change. We're just profiling at the moment whether that will have any impact on our development programme or not. We're not foreseeing that it will, put us off. We just got to find a solution to it.
Great, thank you. And thank you, Ian. I haven't seen anyone else who wants to speak, which is not surprising because this item has taken almost 2 hours. So I must thank the two gentlemen for their patience and perseverance in answering all those questions. And I'm sure I speak on behalf of all the members to say, you know, obviously you haven't had all easy questions, but it's really, really, really welcome that you have made the time to come along and see us today and make these presentations, because you know everyone is working together here to try and improve outcomes for residents. So it's been extremely helpful. If you are both content and there's nothing else that you want to add before you go, then you are, unless you're particularly interested in the remaining items on the agenda, free to go and live your lives happily elsewhere. Adrian and Justin, thank you. You don't look like you want to speak. Alison, I think she has a very brief. Do you want to say something before you go, Alison?
No, well, I did say thank you to the gentleman to start with. As I said, I just want to make sure that we have timelines for these changes and some sort of commitment to it, because I think, you know, we have people come and talk to us and say, yeah, we're going to do this in the future and do that in the future, but there's no target timelines for delivery. And I just feel, Chairman, that it would be useful if we could have some type of feedback on the timelines for the changes, please.
And I have no doubt that Justin and Adrian will provide those. Adrian, you wanted to say something?
Yes, thank you very much. I absolutely agree with you. The reason I'm not giving absolute timelines is it's a public meeting. I do want to give the courtesy to our residents so that they are advised of what's happening prior to it being open to general public. So we do have a timeline. It is it's soon. And I'd be more than happy to take it offline, Councillor Webb, and explain that.
That's great, thank you. Justin, did you have anything to add, or shall we bring this to a close? Excellent. All right, well, thank you very much all. Thank you for coming, and have a good rest of your day. That item is closed. Thank you very much. So item 9 is the outside body feedback. Do any councillors have anything that they would like to bring to the committee's attention from outside bodies? I presume meetings have been fairly sparse, but Robert is a stalwart in this item. So Robert, go ahead.
Thank you, Chairman. I was unable to attend Scrutiny, unable to attend Norfolk Health Scrutiny, but Helen Crane, I think, deputised from me. I don't know whether she has any comment on that meeting. Breckland Area Museum's had its first meeting since lockdown, and that the minutes of that report will be reported to the Joint Museums Committee on Friday week. Thank you.
Thank you, Robert. Linda and Helen, have you been dropped in it? Do you have something that you want to report as well?
Yes, please, Chairman.
Sorry. Go on, Linda.
Sorry, that was really poor chairmanship by me, inviting both of you to speak simultaneously. Linda, if you go first, and then I'll come to Helen.
Okay, thank you, Chairman. Just to inform people that the Breckland Older People's Forum, which was then renamed Your Voice in Breckland, is now officially wound up. We've come under the all the strategic work that Breckland Council's doing anyway, and we work under the Norfolk Strategic Partnership. And we have just sent a cheque for over £1,000 to the DAISY programme, which is part of our constitution, that if we wound up, we gave our funds to a similar organisation. So they're going to be doing a programme specifically designed for older people with domestic abuse. Thank you.
Thank you, Linda. And now Helen, sorry.
Yes, I haven't done a report. I could have done one, but it was an interesting meeting and I did attend. It was a long meeting, a lot to do with the East of England Anglia Trust, and as I say, I did attend.
Thank you, Helen. I don't have any other indications, so that is great. We will move on then to item 10, scrutiny call-ins. And yes, thank you, Ian. Thank you for your contributions. So there are no call-ins that I am aware of. Item 11, councillor call for action. Once again, I implore my councillors that they make use of this extremely powerful and exciting power available to them. But alas, I am not currently furnished with any councillor call for actions. So we'll move on to item 12, which is the work programme. Councillors will recall that I did email. There were some last minute changes to the work programme unavoidably, as I explained in my emails. And I hope it didn't cause too much inconvenience to members that those came about. However, we now have the opportunity, as we always do excitingly, to review the work programme and decide whether or not there are any items that we want to either add or delete. And I see Terry has already indicated, as has Helen, as has Fabian, and I don't see anyone else. So we'll start with Terry.
Thank you, Chairman. I think probably all members are similar to me in being in complete awe of the team that are progressing with fly tipping and prosecutions of late. Absolutely over the moon with the progress which has been going on there. Just yesterday I was dealing with some positive news of a prosecution in my own ward, which is great. The sort of legacy from the fly tipping subgroup was one around prosecutions, but also around education. I'm very happy about prosecutions. I'm less happy about the education and the sort of trying to get culture change amongst people by letting them know what they can and can't legitimately put in their green bin and what they can and can't take to the tip. And so I wonder if we might be able to have a look at an update on where we're at with the education side of it. You'll be aware, as I am Chairman, that there will be further changes to or proposed changes to the opening times for the household waste recycling centres next year. And we need to be making residents aware much better, I think, about what they can dispose of and what the costs are and that sort of thing. So I think that's be a really useful item sometime in the future, near future, I hope.
Sorry, Chairman, you're on mute.
Well, that was rookie, wasn't it? I was just saying, we do have quite a chunky set of items coming up. I'm sure you'll lip-read that anyway. And I noticed that Gordon has indicated. So I'll let Gordon just briefly comment, although it should be very brief, Gordon, because we wouldn't want you to be attempting to sway the work programme, as it's none of your business as an executive member.
It is none of my business, and I'm not trying to do that at all. It's just that I wanted to respond to Councillor Jeremy, thank him for his thanks to the people who are working on it, and just to say that we have started the education programme. We've selected 2 areas in Breckland, one in Thetford and one in Watton, and I am starting to get good results from these education programs, which really have only been going this week. So I would be very happy at some future date to submit to examination by the committee, should they wish me to. Is that a good way to put it?
That is extremely heartening, and I've no doubt Terry thanks you for your thanks to him. And excellent. So I suggest, if members are happy, that we put that on the March meeting, having a look at the work programme, because I think realistically we're not going to have sufficient capacity prior to that, and it hopefully gives a couple of months for the already, as I hear from the executive member, extremely successful approach to our learning in that area to further develop. Are members content with that? Excellent. I have seen David, and I've already had, I think it was Helen, and I apologise, I've forgotten who does it. Was it Linda or Fabian?
Fabian.
Fabian. So Helen, if you go, then Fabian.
Lovely, thank you, Chairman. Yes, I was just, and I did email you about this, and you suggested I reminded you that on the 14th of January, we've got the planning enforcement. How has this been activated during the COVID-19 crisis? Now, although that's very interesting, what I would like to see is that extended to not just during COVID. I would like to know, as do many residents, how enforcement works, what is done and the timeline, but also the conditions on planning. And I think that's something we could scrutinise quite robustly, if you wouldn't mind, if anyone was in agreement to extend that a bit to not just COVID enforcements.
I personally think that's an excellent idea, not least because they now have a bit longer to prepare for such an examination. So if members, I don't see anyone shaking their heads wildly. Oh, David's waving wildly though, so David, go.
I just really want to reinforce what Helen has said, Chair, because if you look at the minutes of the last meeting, I did actually say that the reference to COVID should be removed, and we should be looking at enforcement and conditions very thoroughly, just not in the COVID area. And of course, I understand the reasons for the postponement. There was an illness there. I just hope that come January time, everybody will be fit and well, and there'll be somebody who can give us a report on that so that we can scrutinise it. Thank you.
Well, I provide you my undertaking, David, that unless the entirety of Breckland is struck down in this pandemic, we will have a report to consider in January on that item. And I note, yes, we should have removed the COVID reference, and we will do so in light of the contributions.
Can we have your comments minuted, please, Mr. Chairman?
Please erase that from the minutes, although David on YouTube, I think, already records it.
Thank you.
So, no, thank you. That's really helpful. And I should say, because a councillor did, and they will remain anonymous, suggest something on the work plan, and they did ask whether or not it was their place to do so, or whether they were overstepping their mark. Can I make it absolutely clear that this work programme is your work programme? I am here to serve you. And so if you have any suggestions whatsoever, it is absolutely your place to make those suggestions to me and then to the committee as is appropriate. And Fabian, stay with me. I saw you nodding off just there, so I think you have a point you want to make.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. No, I was actually writing something, so obviously I didn't realise I nod and
yes, no, we all say that when we're writing.
We did say, I think the first meeting when we reopened, and I did ask about looking into how we did the grants for the COVID ones, particularly for businesses, and the town centre in confidence campaign. And my reasoning for that was that, you know, there was some things were right, some things weren't, and we'd all have a lot of local feedback. If some of that is liable to be repeated, particularly coming post-COVID, to you know, get our economy going again in the local sense, you know, we'd like to have that reviewed now, so it's ready and raring to go, and our comments are on, ready for the next wave, if you like, of uplifting our economy.
I think that is a very valid point. I'm considering in my head how to balance the fact that we may have some last minute changes coming in light of the current pandemic situation versus our wish to provide feedback on what's happened to date. Looking at the programme, it's quite busy. Do members have a strong view about when an item such as, I do think it would be a valuable item for us to consider, but do members have a strong feeling as to when we should do that? Based on what we know at the moment, things are going to get worse before they get better. So it's likely that any sort of financial incentives are going to be announced probably before we're going to realistically be able to provide useful feedback in this winter. So our choices either are we try and do it in the 3rd of December meeting, in which case I think we would need to move one of the other items there, or suffer an extremely long meeting. And if members are content to have an extremely long meeting, then that is also an option. Or we have it in the March meeting. Do members, can I just see indications for the January meeting? And I don't see, and I've got one vote for the January meeting.
Rodri, you said
sorry,
December.
Go ahead.
You said
Yes,
December.
Sorry,
meeting.
yes, December meeting, yes.
Oh, right. Yes.
So December meeting, we've got 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, so I think it's fair to say we have, unless people think my counting is skewy, I think we've got a majority for it to go into the December meeting. And do members just want to have a longer meeting for that, or do they want to move an item? Okay, hands up for a longer meeting. Raise them high if you're happy. Okay, I think again we have a majority. Terry, you're very lucky because when I flick between the pages, you appear again. So it looks like I have 2 votes from you each time. But I think nonetheless that was a majority. Just to make sure, can I have hands against, please? So I've got 1, 2. Yeah, no. So that is a majority. So fine, we will add that item then to the December meeting. I caveat that with, I don't know how difficult that piece of work will be to prepare by officers. And so I will ask if Teresa could make immediate inquiries as to what realistically can be pulled together for that. I don't want us to have insufficient information for us to actually provide useful feedback. But equally, if they get deluged in a whole set of new things that they actually need to carry out, I don't want to prevent them from being able to fulfill their wider duty to the public. We're always balancing such important issues. Fine, so that was that. And then I don't think I have any other requests for the work programme at the moment. Is that correct? That's fine. No, I'm seeing none. Okay, so if members are content, then the work programme will be as is, but for an addition as per Fabian's recommendation on the 3rd of December, a deletion of a reference to COVID-19 in the January item per David and Helen's suggestion, and then the addition of an item in the March update. And you'll forgive me, I have actually forgotten what that item was, but I know there was a new item added. It was Terry's. It was Terry's item on learning. That was it, I remember. Okay, fine, good. Excellent. All right then. Well, then that means we can move on to the next item, which I've now mislaid, which I think is actually just to close the meeting. But I wouldn't want to make an error having come so close. Yes, the next meeting, 3rd of December. Be there or be square. Any final comments from members before I let you all go? Seeing none.